So, you will get it. Don't worry. It's nothing to worry about. Okay. So today, did you get this?
Yeah.
Good. You know, because when they did it, they didn't give me a folder on Blackboard, so I had to create a folder. And I was like, I hope I'm doing this right. Right. Okay. So we're going to talk about vascular disorders, peripheral vascular disorders. So these are disorders of peripheral blood vessels. I don't know if I should just say vascular disorders because we're going to talk about aortic coarctation, and that is not truly a peripheral vessel, right? So this is coarctation of the aorta. You've heard about this. I was in your physical diagnosis class when you guys talked about this earlier. Is this acute narrowing of the aorta? Usually between that bend where it goes from transverse to descending. Okay? So this narrowing, picture that in your mind. Okay? Because there are two types of it. You remember ductus arteriosus? Right? That artery that shuns blood in the womb from the aorta to the. Okay, you remember that? Okay. That is the landmark that we use to divide coarctation into preductal and postductal. So if the narrowing is before the ductus, we call it preductal. If it is after the ductus arteriosus, it's called postductal. Now, what you need to realize is that the one you are likely to see in the adult is the postductal. Okay? And why is it important to differentiate these two like this? Because when you have preductal, let me just leave it alone. All right, the one that you're likely to see in kids that is associated with Turner syndrome is the preductal. Okay? Generally speaking, if the ductus remains patent, it can actually compensate for the narrowing. Okay? Because if you have the narrowing after the ductus, then the ductus can actually augment that flow and minimize the. After the narrowing, the ductus can complement the obstruction and increase blood flow. But this is not the way the kids survive. I'll tell you more about how the kids really survive. All I want you to know right now is that coarctation can be preductal or postductal. Okay. Now let's talk about what really happens. This figure is tricky. I want you to pay attention to it. It's tricky. You see, under normal circumstances, you have the subclavian, and then you have the axillary, and the internal thoracic branch of the axillary. And usually, under normal circumstances, blood flows from the aorta. You see the blood vessels with the arrows going toward the aorta, they are in the back. I hope you could see the optics there. This is in the back of this. This vessel is in the back of this. This one is in the back of this. You got that from the diagram, okay? So under normal circumstances, this flow is supposed to go from aorta through those intercostals to the internal thoracic artery and continue. But when you have coarctation, that flow is reversed, right? So these internal thoracic vessels, blood now flows from the internal thoracic artery through the intercostals to fill the aorta. Because the aorta is not filling because of this narrowing. So when this happens in the baby, in the womb, these internal thoracic, these intercostal arteries, they become bigger than they ordinarily should be, right? And because this is happening in the womb, when the ribs are still forming, they now exert a lot of pressure on the ribs, and they cause this notching, multiple rib notching that you see in the kids when they have coarctation of the aorta. Okay? You understand that, right? Yes?
You said it causes what?
Notching.
Notching, okay.
Do I need to write that?
No, no.
All right, good. We're good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right, so how does it, if a kid is missed, how would you suspect, or what would you see in somebody with coarctation? Well, think about it. If there is coarctation, what is the maximum systolic pressure in the left ventricle? Sammy?
Like 140.
140, right, good. I'm taking your cap, you didn't tell me that.
Oh.
So you can imagine, 140 is what the maximum systolic pressure is. And that pressure is supposed to go out into the aorta, and through the aorta distributes throughout the body, right? When you have coarctation, 2/3 of that pressure stays above the coarctation and 1/3 below it, right? So you have this differential pressure that is much higher before the coarctation, which means in the brachiocephalic trunk where the carotid and the common carotid and the subclavian come off from, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the left common carotid and left subclavian. So you have a lot higher pressure in the head than in the rest of the body. So that is the reason the kids get headaches, right? Nosebleeds. So this is a kid that will have, that's not having profuse nosebleed just from sneezing, right? Cold feet, you can understand that, right? Because there is reduced blood flow, right? And then intermittent claudication. Of course, there is reduced blood flow. And if the kid tries to run with the rest of his friends, because he cannot increase his muscle blood flow with exercise, his muscles get ischemic, right? So that ischemia of the feet with exertion is what is called intermittent claudication. And then physical examination, depending on what it is. If you see it in the pre-doctoral, that is between the right brachiocephalic trunk and the left subclavian, you will experience a radial delay. That is why if you're seeing somebody for the first time, part of what you do in cardiovascular exam, I hope you're told, is that you're supposed to feel all the pulses, right? The carotids, the radial, the brachial, the femoral, the popliteal, and even the dorsal spinous. And they should really be equal on all sides, all the way down. In the presence of pre-doctor, remember pre-doctor means before the doctors. That means the obstruction is between the brachiocephalic trunk and the left carotid and the left subclavian. So on the right, the flow is high, but on the left, the flow is reduced because the obstruction is pre-doctoral, right? So then you get what is called radial delay. So when you feel the two radial pulses, you feel one really well and the other will not be as strong. Make sure your fingers are at the same location anatomically, okay, so that you can compare the two pulsations, right? And then when it is post-doctoral, you see radiofemoral delay, right? Because remember, post-doctoral means it's coming after the left subclavian. So the pressure will be high in the radius, but it will be reduced in the femoral, right? Good. So you get radiofemoral delay. Extremely important that if you are able to distinguish the pathophysiologic basis for radial or radiofemoral delay. And of course, coarctation is a cause of secondary hypertension, right? Blood pressure difference. Under normal circumstances, the blood pressure increases the farther away from the heart you take it. So blood pressure tends to be higher the farther away it is measured. So blood pressure tends to be higher in the arm, in the legs than in the arm, right? it tends to be higher in the brachial than at the wrist. And it tends to be higher at the finger than at the wrist. So the farther out you take the blood pressure, the higher it will be. So normal blood pressure is higher in the feet, in the legs, than in the arm. Higher in the radius than in the brachial. Yeah.
It says that the opposite of the brain. It says higher in the arms than it is.
That is,
That's the opposite. Normally.
that is,
Normal.
I'm talking about what is normal.
Oh, okay.
So what you see in somebody with coarctation is that blood pressure will not be higher on the arm than in the leg, which is, I'm trying to create a background for it. Like, oops. All right. And you find out in all patients with aortic coarctation, right? Now, if it is pre-ductal, and also remember, I hope you were told, if you're seeing somebody for the first time, part of your physical examination is to actually take the blood pressure in both arms, right and left, and the numbers should not be more than 5, also 5 to 10 millimeters of mercury difference. It should be very close, okay? And then once you suspect that somebody has aortic coarctation because of radial delay or radiofemoral delay, then you really have to listen in the back. Because remember, when I told you, the coarctation is usually between that place where the transverse aorta becomes the descending, so it's toward the back. So if you listen in between the scapulae, you will hear the murmur of aortic coarctation. All right? And generally speaking, we don't listen to people back for murmurs. Only when you're thinking that this person may have coarctation. And generally speaking, it's in adult. I'm sorry, it's in kids that you will hear it. Because adults have a lot of issues and tissues between the skin in the back and that aorta. All right? Okay. But you should still listen. In an exam, somebody might ask you that. Okay? Very important. This is important for you to know. Aortic coarctation is twice as common in males and females, and the preductal variety is associated with Turner syndrome. You all know what Turner syndrome is, right? Okay. So, this is not what you have. I don't know what I was thinking. The diagram you have is just the brachial artery measurement, right? But this is what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you how you can measure the blood pressure in the arm, in the wrist, in the ankle, and in the thigh, and where you listen. When you're doing it at the radial artery, you should actually try this by yourselves. Because it's not that easy, right? Radial, brachial, this is what you're used to. But you can actually take it at the ankle and also at the thigh. Okay? When you're taking the thigh blood pressure, it is usually in the, you're working with the popliteal artery, and usually it's in the popliteal fossa that you will listen over that stethoscope, just like you do in the brachial, and usually on the medial side. Okay? Of course, what would you see in somebody with aortic coarctation? Aortic coarctation will behave exactly like aortic stenosis, right? So what is on this EKG? Tolu? Exactly, LVH. Now you could see it's such a big, you know, I used to tell it, I told you once that generally speaking, left ventricular hypertrophy should not shift the axis of the heart. Right? I told you that, remember? This is 1 LVH with a shift in the axis. Does that mean what I said earlier is not true? No, I still go, I believe strongly that yes, left ventricular hypertrophy does not shift the axis of the heart. If you find an axis shift with a left ventricular hypertrophy, make sure you're not missing anterior fascicular block. Okay? So this is not, I don't want you to think that this is a left ventricular hypertrophy with a left axis deviation. No, this is more likely to be a left axis a left ventricular echography with anterior cannular. You got that? Yeah. Okay. And this is the reverse 3 sign that you see on X-ray. People talk about it, figure 3 sign of stenosis and post-stenotic aortic dilatation. Of course, you know that when you have the coarctation, this is the back, the other right here. When you have the coarctation, because of pressure, the part of the aorta that is proximal to the coarctation distends, right? But the part of the aorta that is distal to the coarctation dilates. It's a difference. When you distend under pressure. When you dilate generally because of weakness. Okay, so even though we call it post figure 3 sign, they are both dilatation, they are both increase in size of the diameter of the aorta for 2 different reasons. Before the coarctation, there is so much pressure, that pressure is pushing the aorta out. After the coarctation, less blood is flowing. So the vessel vasorum of the aorta in that area are not getting as much blood as they should get. So there is a little bit of weakness, and that dilates the aorta. That is how you get that figure 3 sign that you get on chest X-ray with aortic coarctation. Okay? How do you diagnose it? You can do echocardiography. You can do CT scan. You can do MRI. But what should you do? Many of you will think, oh, MRI or MRA or CT scan or CT angio. No. Because you see, just like heart murmurs, right? If you have an opportunity to not only diagnose the murmur, but also be able to assess the severity at the same time in the same measurement, that measurement is what you want to do. Because you could see narrowing, but you really cannot say what is the functional implication. To what extent is that narrowing affecting that chamber? It's the gradient that will give you that, right? And you can never get an idea of the gradient from CT scan. You can never get an idea of the gradient from MRI or even MRA or even CT angio, because they are not dynamic measurements, right? They are static measurements. They will show you the narrowing, but they'll never tell you this narrowing is so much. Look at the pressure gradient across it. Because the higher the gradient, the greater the obstruction, right? You know what I mean by gradient, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, right. So generally speaking, echocardiography is what you use. That is really diagnostic. The reason it's better than CT and MRI is because you can estimate the gradient. And generally speaking, you're talking about gradient of over 20 millimeters of mercury. And of course, if there is bicuspid aorta, you can also see it at the same time. Okay? Good. So what do? You send the patient for surgery. And there's nothing really good at this. Operative mortality is about 1 to 4%. Okay? And there is, you can do balloon, just put a balloon there and distend it. That is a stopgap measure. That is for if you are in a place where you cannot really do open heart surgery, right? You can do the balloon, or otherwise you just cut it out and anastomose it. Okay? So they divert blood away, cut it out, anastomose it, and restore the blood. Generally, they sound complicated, but they're not really as complicated as they sound today in medicine. Okay? And then, if you miss this and you never send the patient, especially in an adult, it's difficult to miss it in kids, because invariably unless the kid is born is born in the rural areas, like Burundi, right? And then immigrated. Most of the time with the kind of pediatric exam, preschool examination that we do on kids in the United States, you will get this, you pick them. You know? But just in case it gets missed, see what they do. Most of them will be dead by age 50. What kills them? Exactly the symptoms. Because the nosebleed with arteriosclerosis now begins to happen in the brain, so they can get cerebral hemorrhages. The pressure, I mean, think about it. The coarctation, it does not matter. Whether it is pre-ductal or post-ductal, is putting a lot of pressure through the coronary vascular beds. So that pressure through the coronary vascular bed is going to stimulate hypertrophy as the blood vessels try to protect themselves, right, against the increased pressure, right? And then you end up with hypertensive heart disease, and the aorta can rupture. If the aorta is going to rupture, where is it likely to rupture? Is it in the distended part or in the dilated part? Distended part. Okay, exactly. With age, right? Excellent. And sometimes you can get an intimal tear. You know what that is, right? So you know that the tear is intimal. So you know that the aorta has all this. This is the wall. You have the external, media, intima, all these layers, right? This is all. Let me look at that. Okay, this is external. This is intima. This is media right here, right? And blood is flowing through here, right? And now you end up with a rib right here. Okay, once that ribs, blood now flows into that space and separates and begin to split the layers of the aorta on that side. So you get that, and that goes out there, and this goes out here. Whatever, you get my heart, right? Yeah. But basically, it's an intimal tear. It's a tear within the aorta, right? And it's not just the tear that is the problem, because the tear can heal, but the fact that blood now leaks in between the walls and begin to split the walls, right? So then you get what is called the aortic dissection, okay? So that is really what I want to talk about aortic coarctation. Any questions, any concerns? Have I said anything this morning that?
Just quick question.
Yes.
In the part that you said that the aorta being ruptured and the rupture most likely in the distended part.
Yes.
I just trying to wrap my mind around it. Why is it that?
Because you see, the thing about it is, the dilated part is dilated because it doesn't have enough pressure, right? So if it's going to rupture, it's going to rupture because you're getting increased pressure, right? With increased pressure, you're getting the smooth muscle hypertrophy, right? You're distending the endothelial layer, and that is likely to rip. Yeah, that is where that is supposed to be, right? Yeah. Unless you really understand that, you would have thought that, oh well, why not? In the weaker part, that's where it should rupture. But remember, the weaker part is weak because it doesn't have enough blood, it doesn't have enough pressure either, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I missed what you said about nosebleeds.
About what? Nosebleed.
Yeah.
Because of increased pressure above the head than below the head. And you know, you did ENT already, right? No? No?
This week.
Start this week, okay. Somewhere in the inner part of the nose, right about the bridge right there, is an area called Little's area. Well, you did that in anatomy, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. What is the unique thing about Little's area? Huh? Yeah, he has a lot of blood vessels and he doesn't have a lot of mucosa protection. So, if you have dry air and you desiccate the mucosa and you fracture the wall of the blood vessel, if it's going to happen in your nose, it will happen first in Little's area because that area is very vulnerable, right? So when you have increased pressure above the head, all the blood vessels above the head are vulnerable, but the ones that are likely to be susceptible to that increased pressure are those in those areas. So that's why they get nosebleeds. Right, okay? Yeah.
Can you explain the collateral circulation? You said some arteries expanded and the blood
Okay,
reversed.
so under normal circumstances, right, the aorta supplies blood to the whole body, right? So as the aorta is going, it gives the intercostals to supply the intercostal muscles from the back, right? So they come from the back. They supply blood halfway forward, right? And then the internal thoracic artery, right, is a branch of the axillary artery that supplies the anterior part of the rib cage, and it has its own intercostals, and they join together, right? Under normal circumstances, blood flows from the aorta in the back through those intercostals to the internal thoracic forward. But when you have coarctation, you don't have enough blood past the coarctation, so there isn't enough pressure. So instead of blood flowing forward, it now flows to backfill the aorta from the internal thoracic through the intercostal to backfill. And that backfilling, because of the pressure difference between the anterior and the posterior part, the intercostals, they become tortuous. And that distortion of the intercostals on a developing rib creates those indentations that you see on the chest X-ray of a kid with coarctation. Yeah.
After you fix the coarctation, will that?
No, because remember, it depends. Actually, no, because the truth of the matter is that remember that happens in the womb and the kid is born. That happens when the bones are actively growing. So if it is fixed early enough, it might disappear as the bone remodels and the child grows. But if it's fixed as an adult, those are already formed.
And
Right.
are they more susceptible to fractures?
Not really, because remember, rib fracture, maybe yes, because the truth is, remember the neurovascular bundles, they occupy the lower half, the bottom half of the rib. So the upper half of the same rib is intact, But will they suffer more fracture if they are susceptible to blunt force? Probably yes. But have I seen a study that says for sure that is the case? I don't even think anybody has looked at that. Right. But it will make sense that with the erosion of the ribs, that particular rib, if it suffers a blunt force, might fracture sooner or earlier than a normal rib. Yes. Yeah.
On the deck of the coarctation, when you said they can use the subclavian as a flap, so what happens to the blood supply?
Use the subclavian as a swab. Why would they do that?
Well, the second part, the subclavian flap.
Oh, okay. So what is your question?
So if they take the subclavian out, because it looks like it was taken out there, so what happens to the supply that the subclavian normally provides when you do that?
But what you do is you insert this subclavian past the coarctation. The subclavian artery is used as a flap to enlarge the constricted part of the area. So you use if the subclavian is after the coarctation, you implant it before the coarctation so that you increase the blood flow. In pediatric, do you guys do pediatric surgery? It's part of pediatrics, right? They will tell you more about this in pediatrics. Any more questions? You're good? Okay. Why is that every Monday this class is quiet? You guys are busy over the weekend. What do you do? You're tired.
Getting late.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about aortic dissection. I already gave you an idea. In aortic dissection, there is a tear in the intima of the aorta that causes blood to flow in between the layers of the walls of the aorta and force them apart. This is a very painful process because patients actually feel the rip and they tell you something is tearing in me. That is the way they describe it. You know the way subarachnoid hemorrhage present with thunderclap and patients come and say, this is the worst headache of my life. Patients with aortic dissection tell you there is a rip. Something is tearing inside. Right? So it's important for you to understand that. You just need to know that yes, there is a tearing, there's a tear, and blood seeps and begins to separate the aorta. And you know the aorta is a pretty big vessel, right? And this tear can happen from the point and begin to go all the way down to the end of the aorta. So it can be substantial, right? There are many types of classification. You know the truth. I don't need you to know this. I only need you to know that there is the Becky and Stanford. Because these classifications are only for the surgeries. Right? If you end up in cardiovascular service where you're doing vascular surgeries and you are the PA on that team, it's important for you to know this. Because what you need for the surgery depends on the type that the patient has, right? Each of these carry specific surgical requirements and equipments, all right? So what I'm only going to tell you what I know and what I think you should know as a primary care person. Know that there is the Becky and there is Stanford. The Becky type 1 is when the dissection starts and it's all the way, right? Type 2 is only in the proximal. Type 3 is in the distal. And Stanford just says, forget that, just call it A or B, right? All of it, some of it. That's all that is. Please don't waste your time trying to figure out which one starts where and ends where. That's not important. All I need you to know is, if I'm going to ask you, which I normally don't, is to ask you which of the following technique is used to classify the aortic dissection. The Becky, the bunk, the jabu. All right. Now, the thing about it is, who gets this tension? Who is likely, whose intimer is likely to rip? See who gets this tension? Hypertensives, tricuspid valves, aortic root dilatation as a result of connective tissue disorders. You know about Marfan syndrome, right? Ehlers-Danlos. Do you know that if somebody with Marfan syndrome develops aortic root dilatation, and when you measure it, it's more than 4.5 centimeters, that person can never get pregnant. They will die. They will never carry that pregnancy. So the way this is this little point I made here, the way it is pitched at you or pitched to you in an exam, is they will tell you a patient with a history of Marfan syndrome recently got married and coming to see you for pregnancy counseling. So you will do an ultrasound to see what the dilatation, aortic root dilatation is. If it's more than 4.5, you're going to tell them, you really shouldn't get pregnant. You really shouldn't get pregnant. You will not survive this pregnancy. That's no matter what we do. Okay? You know, we say never in medicine, but that is what you should, the advice you should provide as a physician. I caution you against it. The operative mortality is high. The probability that you will die in that pregnancy is extremely high. And and there is nothing we can do to minimize the risk. Okay, very important. All right, then aortic coarctation. We already talked about that. Thoracic aneurysm, vasculitis, smoking, chest trauma, cardiothoracic surgery, cardiac cath. Do you see that? The cardiac cath that people refer to the oh, you're diabetic, you're hypertensive, you have too many risk factors, we need to get a cardiac cath. That is not a benign procedure. Think before you do it. I just told you about my 75-year-old woman that developed SIADH, chronic SIADH, and was dropping sodium. Remember that woman I told you? Yes. And she went to California, and before I could get there in about 20 hours, they already cut the woman. Like, why are you doing that? You know, she's 75 years old. Because your catheter can precipitate. It's not a benign procedure. It's not like it's risk-free. Moreover, she didn't come here for chest pain. She came here for low serum sodium. She was passing out from low serum sodium. And you know what happened? Despite the fact that I went to the hospital and I talked with the doctors, I said, listen, if you guys can just get the microslide thing started, I can continue it in the clinic, because the plan wouldn't give me approval for it. You know they didn't do it. You know why they didn't do it? They say cost. They say the cost of it is too much. So they sent the patient to me with the serum sodium of 120, 28. And I knew it was a question of time. She'll be back in the hospital in 2 weeks. So I started thinking, okay, what do I know about the kidneys? And supposing I'm in Burundi with this patient, what would I do? And I remember that when you eat a lot of beans, you also drink a lot of water. You remember that? If you eat a lot of steaks, you drink a lot of water too. Because when you eat a lot of protein, you form a lot of uric acid and urea. And you will pee more. It's called solute diuresis. It's a good pee because it's mostly water. The water that is needed to get rid of the excess urea and uric acid. So what I did was, okay, I knew about solute diuresis, right? And I knew this patient is, the reason she's sick is because she has SIADH, right? Syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. So she's holding on to water. What can I do to fight the ADH? Increase her solute intake and give her sodium tablet. That was exactly what I did. And in 1 week, the sodium went from 129 to 139. You know, and I did not need anybody to approve the microcycline anymore. You see, this is why you're going to be good graduates. You are not just going to be good, you're going to be excellent. You're going to look for a way to make it work, because you're going to have such a tremendous understanding of the human body that no insurance stops you from helping patients. So what I do, I went online, looked for high protein diabetic snacks, printed the images for the daughter. I said, make sure she takes one of these every single day. And I gave her 1 gram sodium tablet, 3 times a day. So I loaded her with sodium and I drained her out with protein diet. I beat the SIDH. Now she's home, conscious, going about her life. In 1 week, I did not put a dime on the healthcare system. Do you know what would have happened if I didn't do that? Her sodium keeps dropping to 118. The lowest it was 118. And whenever your sodium goes below 120, you're not able to make your serum becomes so dilute, right, that water begins to rush into cells. Cerebral edema, pulmonary edema. Bad things begin to happen. And the woman was always falling asleep, losing consciousness as the serum sodium was dropping. She was admitted 3 times already. But nobody was bothered about that, because nobody really took the time to step back and say, okay, wait, we have SIDH here. What can we do? Everybody wanted to do whatever they can do to make money. This is the healthcare system you're going to practice in. And believe me, many, many times you're going to be the lone voice, like John of Patmos. You're just going to be the only one who cares, really. I mean, there are few clinicians that truly care about patients. Believe me, don't be fooled. They are not in it because they care. They are in it because it's a job. 90% of clinicians are like this. And when you truly care about patients, you're going to have a fight on your hands. You better be well armed. And you don't need guns and knives. You need knowledge. And you need courage. That is why I don't need you to be timid. I'm filling you with a lot of information. Is to embolden you. What you know, you know. And believe you me, everything I've told you is the truth. Is the fact. If you want me to start giving you articles to support all the claims I've made, I'll come sending them to you. But you know a lot. And I need you to be courageous. You don't have to be rude. Just be bold. Just because somebody has MD, PhD, MBSS, stupid behind their name, does not mean they know anything. As far as that patient is concerned, and it does not mean they care. People can be so smart and be yet callous. It doesn't take all this big, highfalutin knowledge to help people. To help people save lives, you only need little knowledge and a big heart. That's all you need. Little knowledge that is factual and a very big heart, and you will make a lot of difference. But you need to have the courage to stand up and speak up. They may or may not listen to you. One of my students in the last class saw a patient at the clinic, and the patient was diabetic, and A1C was 14. It's Brianna's friend, actually. And so they were there, and she was very concerned about the nonchalant attitude of the clinician towards this patient. So she went after the clinic and pulled the patient aside on her own time and was talking to the patient about diet and everything. And the patient was telling her how difficult it is to maintain diabetes and everything. And she was really trying to give the patient information and encouraging her. All right? So she did that. She thought she's done such a good job educating that patient. So when the clinic went out on break and she was going to lunch, she now saw the woman. And you know where she was? She was buying donut. So she called me. Said, Dr. Martins, you know, I just talked to this patient for a long time on diet. And guess where she was? She was buying donut. And she was really disappointed and felt like she wasted her time. So I said, okay, so Brennan, I've forgotten her name now. So I said, okay, do you do something that you know you shouldn't do? He said, yes. I said, and how long have you been knowing you shouldn't do it? She said, some of them for a while. I said, humans don't change like that. He said, sometimes you just have to keep reminding them and raising the stakes. See, I still telling my patients, you really need to control your blood sugar, right? When that doesn't work, say, you know, you might go blind if you don't control your blood sugar. I don't deliver all the complications in one visit. You need to control your blood sugar and keep your A1C under 7. That's for the first time. If I see them 3 months later and nothing has changed, say, you know, if you don't do this, you will have heart problem and kidney problem, and I don't know when. Once you lose your kidneys, you don't get it back. I can only help you keep what you left with. I'm not going to be able to make this one you're losing come back. Remember that. If nothing happens, if it's a guy out like, you're going to lose your erection. See, so you keep raising the stakes. That is the way it is. That is the way humans, that is how we reform society. Right? It was the reason that governor put 3 strikes in place. So if you want to do something wrong, the cost of it keeps increasing. That is what deters you. Right? When I told this class that they must attend graduation, you know what they asked me? Because they really don't want to come, because they are so angry with administration. for some reason I don't really cannot tell. They're like, so what is the repercussion of not coming? So they really did not want to come. And they're like, so what would, basically what they're saying is, what would you do if we don't come? They are still kids. I knew that that is not the route I want to go, because really I have nothing on them. They can choose not to come, and they're right. I'm like, okay, so it's okay, fine. There is no direct consequence to you. I said, but you make the job of program advocacy a lot more arduous for me. Do the right thing. Go. And most of them now change their mind. They will go. We do things because we care about people, not because we are afraid of them.
Sure.
If you care about people, they will care about you. And if they care about you, believe me, they will do things they don't want to do because they care about you. The conversation changed from what would you do to what would you want us to do. It's about love and care. The same thing in relationship with your patients. Don't threaten people. God gave them liberty. Find out what they want to do. If you can work together, work with them. If you can't, look for a middle ground and walk away with your win and leave it alone. This is the most important part of your education on this campus. How do you really negotiate with people that are hurting themselves, to make them understand that you're hurting yourself and you really need to stop? And the reason you need to stop is because I care about you and I need you to care about you. I can't care about you more than you. You have to care about you just as much. Then I can help you be the best you can be. It's a lie if I tell you I care more about you than you. Nobody cares about you more than you. You know? But you see some people talk in practice like they care more about patients than patients themselves. No, put yourself in their shoes. You will do worse than they're doing. If you really understand where these patients live and what they go through. You know? Anyway, so risk factors for aortic dissection. I want you to notice, I got into all that rabbit hole because of cardiac cancer, right? And intra-aortic balloon pumps. I want you to notice that these are therapeutic measures. They are well intentioned, but they end up hurting patients, right? And also notice that many of these things that you see here, they cause the dissection because they weaken the intima. Okay? Atherosclerosis from hypertension, bicuspid valve because of pressure. Bicuspid valve means the aortic valve has 2 cusps instead of 3. So when the blood leaves the left ventricle, instead of leaving into the center of the vessel, the jet is directed against the wall, right? And when the jet against the wall, you begin to abrase the intima little by little, and then you end up with that rip and dissection, right? Okay, so, and then thoracic aneurysm, the same thing. You're distending the intima, and then you rip it if you distend it far enough. The vasculitis is an inflammation, it weakens the intima because it distends it. So you see, I mean, there is specific pathophysiology for each one of these. I need you, don't take this to be just a list. Understand why each one and how each one will cause the intima. You already know it. You know about atherosclerosis. I told you about distension and the intima rip. You know all that. Everything you need to know is here. Chest wall trauma, the same thing. That is a direct trauma. You hit somebody in the chest. Boom. You rip the aorta and they can die. That is why you should think twice before you get in a physical fight. Avoid physical combat. The only time you can get into a fight is if you are ready to kill that person. Think about what I said. I wasn't making a joke. The only time you should get into a physical fight is if you're going to kill that person. Because you know what? If you beat the guy up now, he's going to come back for you. He will come back prepared. Do you know how many people beat somebody up and the guy comes back later in the night and shoot the whole family? Never get into a physical fight unless you go finish that guy tonight. So that there will be no him anymore. You don't have to worry about it. If you're not going to do it, then always walk away from physical fight. Even when people slap you, turn the other cheek. Because you know what? It doesn't end there. I've seen a man die because he was slapped by a woman. It wasn't the slap that killed. You don't know what date of death is hanging on people's head. They're just looking for somebody to hang their death on. Why should it be you? Walk away. What do you lose? Nothing. You only walk with your life and safety. If you're a soldier, it's a different story. You can defend yourself, but please avoid physical combat as much as you can. You learn to fight not because you want to fight, but you want to be able to defend yourself, right? But avoid it. That's why if you see well-disciplined martial artists, fight is their last resort. Okay, so remember that. Blunt trauma to the chest. You may not mean anything by it. You could just be a thud on the guy's chest. And that might be all he needs to go into some fatal arrhythmias. I'd be like, what happened? Then the state will start wondering whether you had intention or you didn't have intention. Is it murder or is it homicide? You really need all that? Nobody does. So how does it present? I've told you, chest pain. But this chest pain is not pressure-like, right? It's a tearing pain. It is acute if you see your patient within 2 weeks of onset. It is chronic if the patient presents after 2 weeks. Okay? 1% mortality every hour for the first 72 hours in the acute case. Right? So if somebody comes to say they have chest pain and the chest wall is ripping, you don't have time to be trying to figure out what the heck is going on. You're thinking this is dissection, you're calling 911 immediately. Okay? Mortality rate in acute setting up to 90 at 12 weeks. Intermittent claudication, radial, arm leg, blood pressure differences, upper back systolic murmur. Do you see how this presents just like aortic coarctation? Right? You can understand that if you have dissection and a false lumen is created, right? That false lumen is created between the intima and the media, distends them, and that distension creates a narrowing of the true lumen. That is why the symptomatology of dissection and coarctation are exactly the same because of the distension of the false lumen that is created by the dissection. And the narrowing of the true lumen gives you the symptomatic manifestation of coarctation. And in exam, they test that all the time. I've seen several of your questions. They test it all the time. One other big difference in anybody that presents with this set of symptoms is that it is either coarctation or dissection. And you felt the difference from up the back, the acuity. Dissection is an acute, severe onset chest pain. Do you have chest pain with coarctation? No, you don't. I didn't give you chest pain, right? So remember that one big difference between coarctation and dissection is chest pain. The signs, the physical signs are very similar because at the end of the day, the signs and symptoms are determined by the relative difference in the amount of blood available in the aorta before and after the coarctation, before and after the dissection. You got that? Mm-hmm. Excellent. Sudden onset severe chest pain that radiates to the back, front, up or down, depending on the type of dissection, and associated with signs of coarctation. Painful. That is the reason aortic dissection was often called painful coarctation. Right? But I want you to remember that I don't like that name because there is pain in coarctation. Only it's not chest pain. Remember, there is intermittent claudication in coarctation. When the kids walk, because of the reduced blood flow to the muscles of the leg, it becomes ischemic and painful. So there is pain in coarctation. The truth is that the pain in coarctation is not in the chest. So the real difference, the reason they call it painful coarctation is because there is no chest pain in coarctation and there is chest pain in dissection. You got that? Mm-hmm. Excellent. So, again, when somebody has, if you are thinking somebody has dissection and you're in a center or a clinic setting where you're not attached to a big hospital, don't waste your time doing EKG and all that. If you're thinking this is dissection, send that patient out. Okay? But in exam, they will tell you, do EKG. Yes. What would you see on EKG? Dissection has no electrocardiographic manifestation. Right? The electrocardiographic manifestations of dissection depends on its associates. So if somebody is dissecting because they have left ventricular hypertrophy from chronic hypertension, you will see LVH. Right? If the dissection compromises the coronary orifice from the aorta and creates ischemic changes in the heart, then you will see ST2 wave changes on the EKG if the coronary ostium is involved. CT scan is really what we want to do to diagnose, because it's not just CT scan, it's actually CT angio. Because when you do CT angio, the contrast would allow you to see the true lumen and the false lumen. And you could see that double lumen vessel. So this is dissection. Okay? And that is better for acute cases. You know why? Because CT scan is faster than chest x-ray. Just wheel the patient in, boom, and they go through the scan, result is ready 1-2 hours. Chest x-ray is like 15-20 minutes. So. But because it's cheaper, a lot of lines for it, right? So CT scan for acute cases, MRI, it gives you more detail. But anyone had MRI before? Yeah, you like it? When I went for my MRI, I felt like I was in a coffin. I'm like, I just close the lid unless, let me save my price. MRI is cumbersome. All these weird noises and it's crazy, man. Sometimes like you're going through a grinding machine. So I think it was grind me down. You do MRI, you get more details, but you have, in chronic cases, you have time. So you can send patients for MRI. All I want you to know, really, is that do CT scan acute presentation. Don't rely too much on EKG because the finding can actually confuse you. Because you know the truth, if somebody coming with a tearing chest pain, and you do EKG, and you see ST depression and T-wave depression, unless you're a very strong clinician, you would think that this patient is having a heart attack. Right? You'll be looking for thrombolytics instead of sending them to CT scan. But if you're so well trained and you know that my patient history is the most important piece of technology I need, that's the way you should practice medicine. Patients know best what is going on. And if your patient tells you, this pain is the first time I'm having this pain, is tearing, I feel something is ripping in me, regardless what you see, that is aortic dissection until proven otherwise. Because generally with coronary artery disease, patient will have angina. They would have had it several times. right? Before they now infarct. So why would you, so even if you're looking at EKG changes that is suggestive of ischemia in a patient that already told you they have ripping chest pain, then you know like, well, this patient most likely has aortic dissection with involvement of the coronary ostium. Yeah, there is ischemia going on, but that's not my problem right now. This dissection is what I need to deal with. So how do you know she's dissecting? Listen to her story. It's a tearing chest pain, it's severe, it's sudden, and this is the first time. Right? And moreover, they might even give you, I give you a 36-year-old non-smoker athletic. Where is the risk factor for coronary artery disease in this guy? Do you see how you synthesize information and make decisions based on your patient history? You can never go wrong. You know, you can never go wrong if you make your decision based on what the patient said. Very important. If you do a chest x-ray, you will see a wide mediastinum, right? The reason the mediastinum is wide is because the aorta is now double lumen. There's a true lumen and there is a false lumen. Okay? And sometimes if you do, radiologists can actually show you a paratracheal shadow that represents a tortuous distending aorta. Alright? Pain is the big deal with aortic dissection. So they need pain control. And usually it's morphine, okay? Narcotic, analgesia. And then you want to do everything you can to reduce the shear force. I already discussed what the shear force is with you, right? You remember what shear force is, right? Okay. And the way we do that is to control blood pressure and reduce pulse rate. You want to put pulse rate at 70. So beta blockers are your best bet. If your patient is asthmatic and you cannot use beta blocker, use non-diazepam calcium channel blockers like
Diazepam.
right? Then you control blood pressure. Your goal is to keep the mean arterial blood pressure less than 70. Okay? Remember, mean arterial blood pressure is pulse pressure divided by 3 plus diastolic. Okay? It's not systolic blood plus diastolic divided by 2. No. You remember how to calculate mean arterial pressure, right? Okay. So what you want to do is to keep the mean arterial pressure less than 70. And generally speaking, we use labetalol and nitrochloride for that. When is surgery indicated? In all type A. You know type A, the one that involves the entire ascending and descending. In type B, the one that involves the descending portion. Okay. You don't need surgery all the time. But you need surgery if there is visceral involvement, renal involvement, extremity involvement, or you're having an aneurysm. Of course, visceral involvement is understandable, right? If the superior mesenteric artery gets involved, you know what will happen? What will happen, Jenny, if the superior mesenteric artery gets involved? You will think you will infarct the gut, the stomach, the duodenum. Who can live with infarction of the bowel? Nobody can. The patient eats, food goes right into the peritoneal cavity. So that's why you have to act. Renal involvement, the patient will go into acute renal insufficiency right there and there is no coming back from that. Right? Extremity involvement, you can get gangrene. Only gangrene. Right? Aneurysmal enlargement, well, that is the stage before rupture. You want to see rupture on your hand? Ignore aneurysmal enlargement. Who can survive a rupture of the aorta? How long does it take you to die if you rupture your aorta? Seconds, minutes. You're talking aorta here. In a few beats, the entire cardiac output is, the entire blood volume, intravascular volume is in spaces they shouldn't be. So these are not things you want to play with. How do you fix it? Stenting and grafting, depending on where you are and how accessible it is. You can stent it, You know all about stent now, right? You just get a wire mesh and put it in and compress. They put it in the true living, right? And then when the wire mesh expands, it compresses the walls on both sides and closes the false living. The problem with the mesh is that many times they become buried with the healing process and they become thrombotic. So you have to give them antiplatelets most of the time, right? But if you do graft, then you can actually cut out the section and fix the.
Quick question about that, because I was reading that and I was wondering, like, since that it's a temporary measure, right? For you to like do a stent on a person.
If you see dissection in, say, a 70-year-old male,
yeah,
a stent will last 5-10 years, maybe.
Oh, okay.
You know, what is the average lifespan today in America? About 70, 80.
Yeah.
Thereabout. Yeah. So if people are like, you're looking at life expectancy, and if the duration of the stent will put them beyond the life expectancy, you choose that.
Yeah.
Because the grafting is not a benign procedure.
Yeah.
In such an elderly person, a graft works when you're sure of a clean vessel that you can anastomose and will heal.
Okay.
If there is atherosclerosis and the blood vessel is partly lipid, partly tissue,
Yeah.
can you put stitch through fat?
No.
No, you can't stitch fat. You will learn that in the summer. Kenny will tell you, you can't put a stitch through adipose tissue. It doesn't hold tissue, it doesn't hold stitches. Okay. So the decision to use a stent or a graft depends on a lot of factors. The age, the history, and all stuff there.
If it's like a 30-year-old person that you had to go ahead and do that
Yeah,
too.
you might do a graft.
So like, if you decide to do a stent, like they're definitely gonna get a cabbage eventually. If,
It
like,
depends
for
on where it is, because
Okay.
cabbage is for
For,
coronary
yeah,
for the
because
heart.
that's what I'm speaking about.
Yeah, but remember that if somebody has a type B, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
of aortic dissection
Yeah.
in the descending portion of the aorta,
Yeah.
their coronaries are already spared. So if you put a stent there,
no
nothing's
point.
going to happen. You know. But these are surgical decisions that it's not one person decision. In a room, you have to have the cardiologist, the nutritionist, whoever else needs to be there, and people sit around the table and they look at the pros and cons of every procedure. That is exactly how it's done at UCLA. That is how it should be done. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Complications. You can understand the complication. If you have a type A or type DeBakey type 1, right, or Stanford type A that involve the proximal aorta, think about that. You're distending the aorta. Very soon you're going to take the aortic leaflet, pull them apart. So you get aortic valve involvement and the patient will develop aortic regurgitation. Now with aortic regurgitation comes volume overload, right, of the left ventricle. With volume overload comes heart failure. Usually left heart failure, then right heart failure, and your florid congestive heart failure, right? So that's how that happens. And heaven help you if the dissection is so proximal that it implicates the reflection of the pericardium on the aorta, which means it can have access into the pericardial space. So instead of having a false lumen, the blood is not dissecting right through into the pericardial space. You're going to end up with tamponade. You understand? You understand what I'm saying, right?
Wanna say that again?
Okay. You know that the aorta comes off of the left ventricle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So left ventricle and aorta comes out of it, right? But on that ventricle is the visceral pericardium, right?
Mm-hmm.
And parietal pericardium. They reflect off of the aorta as it leaves. So if you have dissection and you have a false lumen dissecting right about there, you can access that space. That happens, you're going to bleed into your own pericardial cavity. You're going to get a tamponade, right? You're going to get positive pressure in the pericardial space that is going to create a restrictive cardiology, right? And then patient will go into tamponade. And you know tamponade will kill you in no time if you don't do something very quickly about it. All right?
So just put in pressure on that space.
Huh?
Nothing is leaking, it's pressure.
Yeah. Once the blood leaks into the pericardial space, the pericardium will stop additional leak. As a matter of fact, you know what is interesting? Because the pericardium is a thick, unyielding, fibrous tissue, when the patient begins to bleed into it, the pericardium will contain it. As soon as the pressure within the pericardium equals the pressure in the aorta, no more bleeding takes place. But by then, you've accumulated positive pressure in the pericardial space. You're squeezing your own ventricles down. So the left ventricle cannot receive blood from the lungs. The right ventricle cannot receive blood from the body. So your patient goes into the, what is that triad called?
Next try.
Exactly. So you get neck vein, this time, yes.
Will you, alright, so we're also giving you guys out.
Okay. He give you, wait, let me make sure I understand the question. Will what give me the diastolic normal? Tamponade does not have
No,
any.
not that.
The dissection?
As you said, you'll have aortic regrade, right?
Yes.
So will you hear diastolic?
Yeah, even if you have irrigation, you get diastolic normal. And you have the volume overload of the left ventricle, yes. Yeah. I know what you're doing, Jerry, but I see your cardiology with my talk. And that's a good idea, yes.
Is this not gonna give you a pleural effusion?
Pleural effusion?
Yeah, because you know how like that's associated with tamponade.
Yeah, you can have, once you have tamponade, you tamponade the ventricles. If your patient, this is like going out on a limb right here, tamponade is an acute cardiovascular complication. If the patient tamponade for a long time and goes into congestive heart failure, you can get pleural effusion as well, right? But generally speaking, because of the acuity and the severity of dissection at the beginning, patients don't even have time to develop congestion. They go straight into tamponade, Beck's triad, they will pass out, and on top of all this, you can get all these crazy arrhythmias that will take your patient out, even beside the tamponade. Got it? All right, and then because of the false lumen and the true lumen, the body is still trying to fix the rib in the intima. Clot is forming to seal the rib, and of course it's not perfect. You're trying to seal. It's like you're trying to plug a pipe when water is still flowing through it. Right? At the end of the day, you're going to just wash the sealant downstream, right? And that's exactly why they also get thromboembolism, right? So you might struggle so hard and save the patient, schedule them, relieve the pressure, give them whatever they need, manage the shock, and then you're like, wow, we did that. Then the next day you're examining the patient to find a blue toe. Like, what the heck? This toe is out because the patient flipped a little clot while you're saving their life. Yeah, you know? In Africa, they say that if a wind that is intended to take off your head blew away your cap, you should be thankful. Right? Okay. Any questions on this section? Are you guys enjoying this?
Yeah.
Good. You should enjoy this. You know, it's fun. If you get an opportunity to practice medicine in a place where you see all this, you will be glad you did. That's why I told you, I'm going to say it again. Never keep one job. Never. Whatever you do, most of you are going to end up in primary care. But please, spend one day, one half day, or 1 day a week, a month, however you do it. But no longer than a month. Every month, at least, hang out in the emergency room. Because if you do that, you will keep seeing these acute cases and you will keep your skills. If you just stay in a primary care setting, you will be clinically dead in 1 year.
Wow.
You will not remember anything anymore. You see how quickly became a clinician, very quickly you become a non-clinician. You'll be talking to your friends and they'll be talking about, you know, my dad just had an aortic dissection. And you'll be like, what is that again? I remember that. Then your friend will look at you, even if you've been taking care of their kids and doing a good job, because you couldn't even understand what a heck dissection is. Like, I was talking to Jane, she didn't even know what that thing is. Maybe we shouldn't take Ruben to her anymore. This is how people think, you know?
Yeah.
But they'll tell you, oh, dissection, oh, that sounds pretty serious. Do you know what type? I said, no, the doctor didn't tell me that. Now you've established your professionalism. Even though you may not remember what they kept the type of. But at least you know there are types, right? And she didn't know there are types. So she would say, oh, my friend Jane said, what type of dissection did my father have? Now, because you'll be able to throw your name out there. Now, I know a doctor too. You know, people feel good when they can come back to you and bounce ideas off of you as a clinician. You know, and when you disappoint them in that area, believe me, they really feel disappointed. You know, don't put yourself in there. Spend one day a month in the emergency room somewhere. When I finished residency, I did ICU round for 10 years. Managing vents and working and rubbing shoulders with all the specialties. That is the reason I know a lot about critical care medicine. I'm an internist. I'm not a pulmonologist and critical care specialist. No, I'm just an internist. But there is nothing you do in the ICU that I cannot tell. And if you're making a mistake, it doesn't matter who you are. I know, look, you are making a mistake here. Look at the numbers. And I want you to have that level of comfort and confidence with acuity. But the only way you will keep that is if you spend on a regular basis. And don't think that you will retain it more if you spend 1 week than 1 month. No. All your brain needs to retain it is the regularity. Just go there and every month, even if it's half a day, spend it there. Hey, you're making money. You make a hell of a lot more money in the urgent care than you make in regular practice. And you will learn too. And the truth is, you know why you're there. They don't know why you're there. You know? So do it. It will really help you. All right, so I'm moving on. Before I give you a break, let's do aneurysm. You with me?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so aneurysm is a localized, blood-filled, balloon-like bulge through a weakness in the wall of a blood vessel. It can happen like this. We call it a vascular aneurysm. Or you can take the entire length, the longitudinal axis of the blood vessel. In which case, it's called a fusiform aneurysm. Okay? You find anybody in this class can do this? No. Okay. You have to be sick to do this. Only patients with Ehlers-Danlos and Marfan's can do this type of stuff. I had one in my clinic who actually tried to do this to show me how flexible you are. I'm like, I know how flexible you are. You know. So aneurysm we classify into aortic and peripheral. The central aneurysm, aortic aneurysm are also known as central aneurysms. Okay? They could be in the thoracic or in the abdomen. The more common location for them is in the abdomen. There is a patient I saw on Thursday in clinic. He came in after 6 years for a routine follow-up, and I was looking at him, and his face was puffy. Like, why is this guy's face puffy? You know that puffiness in the face is always a sign of kidney disease. If you have edema from cardiovascular disease, your legs swell. If you have edema from kidney disease, it's your face that swells. If you have the cardiovascular disease, your legs swell, usually in the evening. It's dry in the morning because you've been laying on legs. Gravity has been returning the blood to your heart. But if you have kidney disease, your face swell first in the morning. You wake up with facial puffiness. So I'm like, why is his face puffy? He was even seeing me at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So his face must be puffier earlier in the day. If he's still puffier too. So I look in his record. His BUN 6 years ago was borderline. He's a smallish guy. His creatinine was like 1.2. Why does he doesn't even have that much muscle? Why is his creatinine so high? So I kind of became interested in his abdomen. And there it was, this pulsating central abdominal mass that I believe strongly the guy has abdominal aortic aneurysm. You see? And it's involving his kidneys, his renal arteries, right? I sent in for ultrasound, but we're still waiting for the plan to approve it. I'm saying this to you that sometimes you don't need to, all you need to do is just pay attention, take a good look. That is why you're clinicians. You're going to be as good as how well you see, how well you feel, how well do you hear, and what do you choose to pay attention to. And as far as a patient, whenever a patient walks into the clinic and you're in the room with that patient, you're in the library. I don't do much of physical examination on my regular patient because everything I need, my neural to the head to toe, I get the information by talking to them and looking at them. How are they sounding? How is the eyes moving? Is the tongue moist when it speaks and I'm able to see his tongue? I'm making all this assessment, even I'm listening to the story and tracking what they're telling me. I'm looking a hell of a lot more. So at the end of the day, I just put my stethoscope on their chest. And by the way, you must do that all the time. You must put your stethoscope on your patient every single time you see them. Believe you me, if you don't put your stethoscope on the patient, you didn't touch the patient. And if you didn't touch the patient, you didn't examine the patient. I don't know, patient thinks that stethoscope is some voodoo one that tells the physician what is wrong with them. That is how they think. So when you don't put the stethoscope, it's like, I went to see him, he didn't even touch me. And what they mean by touch me is, he didn't listen to my heart. So listen all the time. Every single time you see a patient, put your stethoscope on their chest. And also have them say, open your mouth and say, ah. Even if they say, ah, you're looking at them. Just because people come with these expectations and they feel disappointed when they don't get it. And what does it cost you? 10 seconds. Alright, so abdominal is more common. And you see that 90% of the abdominal ones are infrarenal and age-related. 2% of men over the age of 55 carry abdominal aortic aneurysm. Okay. When it is thoracic, it could be true or false. True when there is inherent weakness in that aorta, and you can find that in atherosclerotic diseases and connective tissue disorders like Marfan's and Ehlers-Danlos. All right. When it is false, it is usually related to injury. There is no prior weakness. The reason we call it false thoracic aneurysm is because the aneurysmal dilatation was not preceded by a weakness in the blood vessel. It used to be due to steering wheel injury. So somebody injures, have a automobile, motor vehicle accident, and they have a steering wheel injury before the days of airbags, right? They have a steering wheel injury. They used to get flail chest, and they used to have blunt trauma to the aorta. And in that accident, they have ripped something, but nobody notices it, right? Until the vessels become weaker and dilate, and then develop into an aneurysm. So that is usually how that is. This is rare these days. You should worry about this. How do you know the difference between a mass that is close to a major blood vessel versus a mass that is truly a vascular mass? So how would you tell from physical examination an aneurysm from a mass that is sitting on near a blood vessel? Because Okay? You put two fingers on the mass. If your fingers go up like this, that is a mass that is sitting on a blood vessel. And the blood vessel is pushing the mass. But if your fingers go up like this, that is a vascular mass. That means the mass is expanding with each pulse. So it's called expansile impulse. So with an aneurysm, we get an expansile impulse. Okay? Good. Now let's talk now about peripheral aneurysms. They're most common in the popliteal, but they can be found also in the femoral. Especially, when I was an intern, we used to do blood gases on patients that are on the vent every single day. And sometimes, after you've taken it from the radial artery, the artery is no longer easy to access. Patient refuse because it's now more painful. And then we go to the femoral artery and begin to stick the femoral for blood gas. That can actually predispose the patient to femoral peripheral aneurysms. And also when we do cardiac cath, we go through the femoral artery and thread our way up to the coronaries. Again, that predisposes patients to femoral aneurysm. And of course, there are those aneurysms that people are born with. They're called Berry's aneurysm. You find them in the anterior circle of Willis. You know about anterior circle of Willis, right? We'll talk more about that in the summer, right? So you find them also, they're congenital, they're associated with adult polycystic kidney disease. Why is this important? Because adult polycystic kidney disease is not that rare. You can actually see it. And once you see a patient or you diagnose a patient with polycystic kidney disease as an adult, you must look for Berry's aneurysm. Because if you don't, you will lose that patient and you could have saved their lives. Because adult polycystic kidneys, they have suboptimal renal function, but they live. They may end up on dialysis sooner, but they don't die suddenly. But if you fail to connect polycystic kidney disease with Berry's aneurysm, then you will not look for Berry's aneurysm in your patients with polycystic kidneys. And if you don't look for Berry's aneurysm in your patient with polycystic kidneys, then one day that Berry's aneurysm is going to rupture. Your patient is going to develop an acute subarachnoid hemorrhage and they may die. While you're chasing the kidneys, boom, the aneurysm takes your patient out. So you need to kind of like be able, anytime you see polycystic kidneys, Berry's aneurysm. Berry's aneurysm, look for polycystic kidneys. They are always together. Okay? How does it present? Aortic aneurysm is asymptomatic most of the time. And you will just see it because you examine the patient thoroughly. The abdomen has 4 quadrants and 9 regions. You remember that? Good. During your physical examination for the first time on a patient, make sure you do both light and deep palpation in the 9 quadrants of the abdomen. And the only way you will pick an aneurysm is if you do a deep palpation in the periumbilical area. You will feel the aneurysm pushing against your head. Of course, if you do a deep palpation in the periumbilical area of Tarica, you feel a normal aorta. So the lean, skinny people, aorta is directly accessible like that, especially if she's no food in her stomach. Oh, you will feel it. So when you're dealing with lean patients and you put enough pressure, normal aorta you can feel, right? And the way you know this is normal aorta is if you go a little bit up, a little bit down, you can see that this is normal aorta, right? one handbreadth up, one handbreadth below. You feel it. You say this is normal aorta. But if you feel it in the periumbilical area, and then you get to the epigastrium and it disappeared, or you get to the suprapubic area and it disappeared, something is wrong. Right? Then that's how you kind of be able to tell apart. Okay? So, asymptomatic possible mass on unrelated physical examination and investigation. 80% of abdominal aneurysms 5 centimeters or more are palpable on physical examination. Most of them are 5 centimeters or more. Okay? Okay, supposing they didn't come like that, they become symptomatic. What do they present with? Pain, pressure, and rupture, and thromboembolism. Pain, local pain and tenderness. Okay? Local pain and tenderness. That is more common for popliteal though. You see a pain, full mass in the back of the knee, and you feel it and it's tender, and you have an expansile impulse. Pressure. Aneurysms will compress nearby structures. Right? And no matter what that structure is, it could be compressed. So you can get hoarseness when your patient talks. That's hoarseness. When you have recurrent laryngeal nerve compression, you have interference with the vocal cords and speech production. So you have hoarseness. Okay? You can have stridor if you compress the trachea. Right? You can have cough if you have bronchial compression. Chronic cough, patient doesn't have nothing on chest x-ray, just chronic cough. That is why if somebody has chronic cough that's been going on for a long time and they are not on ACE inhibitors and your chest x-ray is negative, do a chest CT. Okay? Believe the patient. If the patient comes to you and asks for Phenergan with codeine, don't do chest CT. Just tell them to go home. Because that means the cough may not be real. Right? But if you know this patient is really distressed by this cough, you're giving cough syrup, you've done everything, nothing is happening, chest x-ray is normal, do a CT scan of the chest. Because it could in fact be an aneurysm. If it is esophageal, you will see compression of the esophagus. You will have dysphagia and you see esophageal compression. And the easiest way to do that is do barium swallow, right? And then you see that, right? Then you can have face arm edema if they compress their superior vena cava, right? If you suppress superior vena cava, that means you cannot drain from above the heart. So the face and the arm will be edematous, right? Then you can have nerve deficit, any nerve deficit if you compress any particular nerve. Now, rupture, God forbid, catastrophic thoracic bleeding, or a contained radioparietal bleeding, spontaneous intracerebral bleeding. You can have any of this in somebody with aneurysm. And then thromboembolism. Remember, aneurysm is a space that is isolated. The blood contained within it is not in the general circulation. So when blood sits still, what happens? It clots. When it clots, they can chip off. And then you get all these thromboembolic phenomena. All right? And this, you remember these two signs? I hope you do. Excellent. Calling and great harm. This is what you get when you bleed into the retroperitoneal space. That is a huge space. Okay? And when you bleed into it, the blood can actually dissect the tissues all the way down to the front. Right? And once you see it here, it's called Collins, and here it's called great harm. I just want you to know that even though we often talk about this in terms of aortic rupture and stuff like that, the place we talk about this is in acute pancreatitis, right? Right, okay. Just know that it's not specific to any disease. It's a sign of retroperitoneal bleeding. You can find it in pancreatitis, you can also find it in aortic rupture. Okay? And if somebody gets stabbed in the back, somebody gets stabbed in the back, and they lacerate their aorta, they will get these signs too. Okay, the sign is only means you're bleeding into your retroperitoneal space. Okay, so aneurysms, when they're old, sometimes they'll be calcified, and you will see them on chest X-ray, right? But that is not where you want to look for them. Normal aorta diameter is 2 centimeters. When the aortic aneurysm is diagnosed when the aortic diameter is more than 3 centimeters. Rupture, the risk of rupture becomes significant when it is more than 5 centimeters. Okay? And then, like I said, chest X-ray, you can see that curvilinear calcification. But you don't want to wait for that. You see that in an old man, and not in all old men, or old person. Ultrasonography, yes, because you can monitor the growth and the dimension. Again, ultrasound is really very helpful these days. That is why we purchased that one, to give you guys a good handle on how to use ultrasound probes, right? Because with an ultrasound, you can actually not only measure it now that it's 4 centimeters, you can have the patient come back in a year and you see what it is now. You can monitor it on your own. You don't need any approval from anybody. You just need to work in a place where the facility is available. And many places now have this portable ultrasound that providers can use. So, remember, risk is significant above 5.5. CT angio, location of the aneurysm and involvement of renal arteries. That's why we do CT angio, right? And another reason we do CT angio is to figure out how we're going to treat it, to plan the surgery. So CT angio is key, and MRA is key for surgery. For you, ultrasound. If you're thinking somebody has aneurysm, do an ultrasound. Okay? Ultrasounds are cheaper, easier to get. Most of the time they will approve it. It's about what? $120. Chest X-ray is $60. So even if the patient doesn't have insurance, most of the time, most people can pay for it. Okay? How do you manage it? It depends. If it is less than 4 centimeters, just monitor it with ultrasound every 2 years. If it's more than 4 centimeters, you do every 6 months. We want to monitor it because once it goes past 5.5, the risk of rupture is high. That patient needs to be referred out for surgery. Okay? When would you do surgery? If the patient is symptomatic, size is more than 5.5, or the aneurysm is growing greater than 0.5 centimeters in 6 months. In other words, you saw the patient now, and the aneurysm was 4 centimeters. And then you saw them the following year, and the aneurysm has gone from 4 centimeters to 5. Even though it is still under 5.5, the fact that it's grown by 1 centimeter in 1 year, that is a rapid rate of growth. That is an indication for surgery. Okay? Elective. If there is a mural thrombus, distal embolism, rupture, emergency, you can't plan surgery. You have to now do the surgery right here, right now. Okay? And what kind of surgery do we do? For peripheral aneurysm, this thing is dying. I think the battery is dead. Okay. For peripheral aneurysm, at least it's still moving my slide, so I'll just hang on to it. Right. So for peripheral aneurysm, again, graft, stent. If there is clot, you have to lyse it or take it out. Okay? And intracranial, you can clip, or you can do what is called endovascular coiling. That is a fancy name for throwing dirt into an aneurysm to initiate blood clot. We'll talk about that in the summer when we talk about intracranial hemorrhages. Okay? All right. I think this is the last slide. Unfortunately, surgery for aortic aneurysm is always complicated. Well, it's not always. whenever you fix an aneurysm, the patient is at risk for 2 complications. Among all the other post-operative complications like bleeding, abscess, infection, the routine ones, there is something called aortoenteric fistula. So you see what happens is that, you know what a fistula is, right? A fistula is an abnormal communication between 2 epithelial surfaces. And you know the endothelium and the intestinal lining, they are both epithelial surfaces. So when you clip the aneurysm and you connect the aorta, sometimes instead of the aorta just healing, the cells, the endothelial cells that are causing the healing, they grow out through the scar and connect with the bowel. And once they connect with the bowel, there will be an abnormal communication between the aorta and the bowel. So blood, frank blood, will be leaking into the bowel. So the patient will have this bloody diarrhea all the time, blood in their stool. Extremely important. So, I know what is interesting. There is no limit. This could happen to somebody up to 10 years after they have had the aneurysm fixed. That is why past surgical history is so important, right? So if they have had aortic aneurysm fixed, you must look for aortoenteric fistula. When people have fusiform aneurysm that is repaired, you compromise the blood supply to the spinal cord. And patient that comes in with aneurysm and you go in to do the surgery, you fix the aneurysm and now your patient is paralyzed waist down. So you see, paraplegia is an acute complication. It's going to happen right after that surgery. Okay? And it's due to prolonged hypoperfusion of the spine through the posterior intercostal arteries from where the spinal arteries come. Right? So you try to fix, because in order for you to fix the aneurysm, you have to divert blood from here. And if the patient is already vulnerable, for whatever reason, atherosclerosis, whatever age, that prolonged ischemia can precipitate anterior cord syndrome. And your patient that walk into the hospital now leave the hospital paraplegic. You fix the aneurysm, but there it is. Now they can't even walk, but they could walk when they came in. So these are bad complications, and they are very common, right? And you can use a Trendelenburg position to minimize this type of complications. But when it will happen, and there is nothing you can do about it. That is why you have to make the patient sign informed consent, making them aware that, we're going in with good intention. We hope to get rid of this aneurysm and this pain, but there are complications to this surgery. You could lose your ability to walk, although it's not common, but it still happens. I need you to know that it could happen to you. All right? Good. Any question? All right, you guys want to take like 5 minutes, because everything we're going to talk about now about peripheral artery disease is just the peripheral equivalent of everything we talked about under atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. Okay? So I'm going to move like kind of fast because I don't want to repeat or bore you guys. So you remember coronary artery disease, how this plaque forms, right? That is exactly how it is formed in the peripheral artery. Okay? The result is exactly the same thing. That is why peripheral artery disease is considered a coronary equivalent. So if somebody has peripheral artery disease, you treat them as if they have coronary artery disease in their risk stratification. Okay? So basically, peripheral artery disease is atherosclerotic vascular disease outside of the heart and brain. When you have atherosclerosis in the brain, it is cerebrovascular disease. When you have it in the heart, it's coronary artery disease. When you have the same thing in the peripheral blood vessels, we call it peripheral arterial disease. The pathophysiology is exactly the same. The different names is just to identify the different regions where the disease, atherosclerosis, is manifesting. Cerebrovascular disease in the brain, coronary artery disease in the heart, peripheral artery disease in the periphery. Okay? And the same mechanism by which you form it is the same thing, right? Toxins, turbulence, inflammation, because injury, you bring in the macrophages, the lipids begin to form, you form foam cells, T-cell infiltrate, hyperplasia, fibrous tissue, platelet adhesion, the body tries to heal, goes into remodeling, the remodeling weakens the blood vessels, predisposes the blood vessels to aneurysms, predisposes it to stenosis, and ultimately rupture or occlusion. The same process, right? Did I go too fast?
No.
Okay. Right. So, peripheral arterial disease is the commonest peripheral vascular disease. I want you to remember that vascular includes arteries and veins, right? Arterial disease means it's an arterial disease, right? So peripheral vascular disease is not synonymous with peripheral arterial disease. You should be clear in your mind. Okay? Right? Okay. Where do you find peripheral arterial diseases? You find them in four main areas. I hate iliac, where the aorta divides into the iliac arteries in that area. For some reason, middle-aged white male smokers tend to get peripheral arterial disease in the iliac space. Okay? You get it in the femoropopliteal area. That is where you get it the most in everybody. Femoral popliteal, where the femoral artery continues as the popliteal artery at the back, right there. That is where you find it in everybody. But if the person is a white male smoker, it's more likely that that peripheral artery disease is in the iliac space. If your patient is diabetic, it tends to be in the tibial-pedal, where the tibial arteries become the pedal arteries. Okay? In diabetic patients. And then in everybody else, it could be in the mesenteric. And when it's in the mesenteric, it could be occlusive versus non-occlusive, chronic versus acute, multi versus single vessel disease. Let's take each of these one after the other. Occlusive means that, you know, when you get black hemorrhage in the heart and you go into acute AMI, when the same thing happens in the mesenteric and you have acute occlusion, there is an occlusive disease. If you have atherosclerosis like you have in the heart, but it's not obstructive, even though it could be, it doesn't cause acute obstruction, but it limits amount of blood that could pass to the organ. It's not causing obstruction, but it is causing ischemia in a way that is a chronic ischemia, not an acute occlusion, right? So that's what I mean by it's non-occlusive. It is there, but it's not occlusive. Chronic versus acute, in other words, it causes chronic ischemia versus causes acute occlusion, right? And sometimes it could be single vessel or multi-vessel. Most of the time they are multi-vessel. So what I put in bold are the commoner presentation. So they're usually occlusive, they're usually chronic, and they're usually multi-vessel. That's why they are in bold. You got it? Okay. So, and I put the picture here for you. Aeroiliac, mesenteric. So the presentation depends on which blood vessel is infected. In the extremity, you have intermittent claudication. Right? Remember what intermittent claudication is? We talked about that so many times now. So these are painful cramps in the leg. They are promptly relieved by rest. They are precipitated by walking. And the distance is fairly specific. So when people have intermittent claudication, they'll tell you, I get cramp in the back of my leg after every 2 blocks. And now it's after every 4 blocks. It's so specific because there is only so much blood allowed to pass into the muscle, right? And whenever the patient needs much more than is allowed to pass, they get ischemia. And the body physiology is so predictable. At that distance that the patient walks before they get the ischemia is called the claudication distance. Okay? So, a very fanciful way of trying to get the vascular surgeon that you know what you're talking about. He said, I have this 68-year-old hypertensive diabetic with a history of peripheral artery disease with a progressive diminution in the claudication distance, now to less than a block. You just told that surgeon that I have a patient, I've watched this PAD for a while, it's worse and it's the worst it's ever been, in so many words. So when you speak, when you communicate like that clinically, people take you more seriously. Now, intermittent claudication is what you want. You don't want rest pain. Because rest pain is continuous burning leg pain. That means now the patient does not have to walk to get the pain. So they have rest pain. Pain at rest. And because it's an arterial pain, when you elevate the leg, think about it. The artery is already occluded. There is sufficient trouble for blood to go past the obstructed blood vessels. Now you're now putting stress by gravity. So you're now, not only are you reducing, you're draining the leg of blood, you're trying to force blood to flow not only through the obstruction, but to do it against gravity. You see, your patient is going to be like, what are you doing? So that pain is elevated, is precipitated by elevation. And the patient at night, when they sleep, they hang their feet like this on the bed. That dependency is needed to facilitate blood flow by gravity. Okay? So it is relieved by dependency. If a patient with peripheral artery disease gives you a history of relief by dependency, that is a sign of critical limb ischemia. That means if that patient gets infection, injury in that limb is less likely to survive. So these are symptoms of critical limb ischemia. The patient has a high risk of limb loss. Now, if you don't pay attention, because you really couldn't triage the patient properly, because you did not put enough emphasis on the intermittent claudication and rest pain, your patient now goes into ulceration and gangrene. All they need is to trip over the child's toy and breach the skin. And that's it. That's all you need. Because remember, if blood does not get anywhere, that means white cells don't get there. If white cells don't get there, that means inflammatory cells can never get there. It's like you block South Central, you set a fire in South Central, and you block 110 and 105. The fire trucks can never get there. You burn that city down. So once you have rest pain, all you need is ulceration, and the bugs will have a feast. And you know, with a doubling time of 20 seconds, how much damage the bugs can do. Have you tried to figure out how quickly bugs can grow with a doubling time of 20 seconds? One bacterium in an hour can become what? A lot. Right? So you see, so all gangrene and ulceration is evidence of tissue loss. Do you know the difference between ulceration and gangrene? Ulceration is a breach in a surface layer. It could be skin, it could be mucosa, but it's a breach in the surface. Gangrene is acute necrosis of the tissue, whether or not you have a breach in the surface. So this tissue dies en masse. Ulceration, there is a breach in the surface. Whatever the surface is, it could be an internal surface, external surface, just means there's a breach in the surface. Okay, very important distinction. Now, so this is what you get. Intermittent claudication, rest pain, ulceration, and gangrene with extremities. In the bowel, you get what is called intestinal angina. What is intestinal angina? So, in normal angina, patients get chest pain when they do exertion, right? Physical activity and stuff. Well, in intestinal angina, patients get chest pain after meal when the gut needs to do work. And because there isn't enough blood going into the gut, they get severe postprandial abdominal pain. And what is crazy about it is that the patient comes to you with severe pain, and they're like, this pain is 10/10, and they're having the pain right now, and you examine them, there is no tenderness. Because the pain is not an inflammation pain, right? Tenderness is a sign of inflammation. The pain is an ischemic pain, so there is no tenderness. The only time you get tenderness is if there is ulceration. But if it's just ischemic pain with intact mucosa, the pain will be there. There will be no tenderness. So, very important. I don't want you to get confused about this. Don't make your patient feel like they are hypochondriac or they are lying. If somebody has severe abdominal pain that is postprandial, and they will tell you, I get this pain within 30 minutes of eating. The pain is precise in terms of onset and occurrence. Within 30 minutes of eating, depending on the severity, it could be within 2 hours of eating, I will get this severe pain in my stomach, right? And when you examine them, you don't find any swelling, no tenderness, no organomegaly. And your inclination, if you're not well trained, is to be like, oh, it's just malaria. No, calm down. Look at the guy. Does he have the risk factors for atherosclerosis? Is he over the age of 60? Is he hypertensive? Is he diabetic? Is his blood pressure uncontrolled? Is blood sugar uncontrolled? Does he smoke? If he has 2 or more of those, he has enough risk to have atherosclerosis. And this could in fact be mesenteric ischemia. Okay? If you miss that, then you develop ischemic colitis. Ischemic colitis is bowel equivalent of ulceration and gangrene. Right? So this is now, you're getting, because of chronic ischemia, you're getting sloughing of the mucosa. And with the sloughing of the, you know what I mean by sloughing, right? Sloughing up. Okay, right. So with that comes bloody diarrhea with left lower quadrant pain and tenderness. Okay? So, where you want to pick it up is here. And how do you diagnose it if you suspect it? Mesenteric angiography. Okay? It is so important that you be able to tell arterial disease from venous disease. You've seen this slide before, right? No? Okay. And I believe you. Arterial disease reduces blood flow to the surface. So the skin will be cold, hairless, dry, shiny, pale, especially on elevation. And it will become red when they dangle the foot. The pain of arterial disease is sharp, stabbing, worse with activity, walking, and lowering of heat. Will relieve the pain. Ulcers tend to be severely painful, pale, gray base. They are found on the heel toe, most of them in pressure-bearing areas. Pulse is often absent or diminished, and edema is infrequent. You don't get edema with arterial disease because in order for you to get edema, blood must flow to the place, right? You don't form, if blood doesn't flow, can you form tissue fluid? If you cannot form tissue fluid, you can't get edema. Right? So edema is not very common with peripheral disease, whereas you get it with venous disease. I put this table here just to kind of like create a contrast for you to appreciate that, because before the end of this class, we talk about venous disease. There is something I want you to pay attention to. You see shiny here, shiny here. I want to be careful about that shiny there, because in edema, when you have edema, and you stretch the skin. When you have edema, you stretch the skin can become shiny, even though you don't have arterial disease, you have venous disease. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Right? So shiny there, do something about it to let you know that it's not specific as the rest of the signs for arterial disease. Venous disease can also be shiny. Because the reason they're shiny in arterial disease is because the skin cells are lost. Right? When the skin cells are lost, the skin basically becomes tense because it's losing cells, right? But in edema, the skin is not losing cells, it's getting stretched. It's shiny for two different reasons, but it could be shining in both venous and arterial disease. Did you understand what I just said? Okay, good. So now you think your patient has peripheral artery disease. How do you begin to evaluate? It's very simple. You measure the ankle brachial index. You measure the pressure at the ankle, and you measure the pressure at the brachial. And you put the ankle over the brachial. Under normal circumstances, you have, like I told you earlier, the pressure is usually higher in the leg than in the arm, right? So what you really expect is for usually it's more than one, right? But not by a whole lot, but it's definitely more than one. So when you do ankle brachial index and you get less than 0.9, that is really what you want. If you get more than 1.3, in other words, the ankle blood pressure is greater than the brachial blood pressure by 30%, then you really cannot say what you're dealing with. Is this a normal person? Or is this somebody with peripheral artery disease. You can't tell. When that is the case, you have to now measure the toe pressures. So you do what is called the toe brachial index, TBI. Okay? If the toe brachial index is abnormal, then it's PAD. If the toe brachial index is normal, the operation is normal. You understand why you have to do toe brachial? Because toe brachial, when ABI is more than 1.3, it could be normal. That's what you expect. Blood pressure should be higher in the ankle than the brachial, right? If your patient has symptoms of peripheral artery disease and your ankle brachial index is more than 1.3, well, if they are normal, why are they symptomatic? Right? So that means you need to do TBI, toe brachial index, to figure out. If toe brachial index is normal, then you need to look for a different reason why they have that issue. It could be spinal stenosis, which people can get claudication with spinal stenosis. I hope they taught you that in orthopedics, right? Okay, exactly. You can get that. So you have to look now at the vertebral column. Then you do TBI. If TBI is normal, then your patient is normal. You have to look elsewhere for the intermittent claudication. If TBI is abnormal, then this is peripheral artery disease. Okay. So you see the two numbers that are really reliable is less than 0.9 diagnostic, more than 1.3 TBI to figure out what is going on. Between 0.9 and 1.3, you have to do other intervention, like outpatient exercise and then repeat the measurement. Because you expect exercise to increase blood flow maximally. So if there is a difference, the difference will become clearer after exercise than before exercise. Yes?
Sorry, what was the normal for the toe brachial?
TBI? Something above 1. Yeah, because it's supposed to be higher in the toe than in the ankle. Okay, so it's something above 1. You know why I don't know it? Because I think it depends on other measurement of the person you're dealing with, the ratio. So the podiatrists, they always deal with this stuff, right? All I care about is ABI is less than 0.9, the patient has PAD, I refer the patient. If it's more than 1.3 and the patient is symptomatic, I send them to podiatry. And I know what I expect them to do is to do TBI. But I've not used it before, you know, and I would imagine that given the different variations in fit sizes and stuff, hypertension versus normotensive, I've not seen any article or any book that gives me a number, right? If you find one, let me know, please, all right? But I know that it's definitely above 1. Normal is above 1. Because the farther from the heart, the higher the blood pressure, right? And since you're always putting the distal over the proximal, the ratio will be more than 1, right? Okay. Do you know why somebody will have ankle brachial index above 1.3 even though they have peripheral vascular disease? It is usually because the measurement by which, the method by which you are measuring the blood pressure, you're not able to collapse the blood vessels properly. It's almost always due to sclerosis, a calcification. It's called Monckeberg sclerosis, right? It's usually to vascular calcification. So it is not that the ratio is really that high in the presence of vascular disease. It's the fact that the calcification in the wall of the blood vessels is falsely elevating the diastolic pressure because you're not able to collapse it properly. So it's a measurement error type of a thing. But just all you need to know is that if your patient is symptomatic and ABI is more than 0.1.3, you might need to do toe brachial index. Okay? How do you really want to diagnose peripheral artery disease? Initial evaluation of peripheral artery disease is usually by Doppler ultrasound, but the definitive diagnosis is by CT angio or MRA. Okay? And this is an example of a CT angio with all those blood vessels in the iliac area. Okay? Now, sometimes in very small artery disease, you have to do what is called digital subtraction, because the vessels are so tiny that you cannot see the difference in the amount of blood between normal vessels and occluded vessels. So what you do is you do the MRI without the contrast, and then you do the MRA with the contrast, and now you use the computer to subtract the normal MRI image from the MRI image with the contrast. So that eliminates the background flow and highlights the occluded blood vessels. It's a radiology technique. I just give it to you for information. All you need is initial assessment, ultrasound, definite diagnosis, MRA or CT angio. Okay? So if you're in an exam and somebody gives you, how would you make a diagnosis of peripheral artery disease, and they give you CT angio, CT MRA, and they give you Doppler, what would the answer be? If so, how would you, a patient present, you're evaluating a patient for peripheral artery disease, what is the next step? How would you make the diagnosis? And they give you ultrasound, CT angio, and MRA. What would the answer be? Ultrasound. Because remember, I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
No, I said, how would you make the diagnosis? No. Did I say definite? No, that's I misspoke. I wanted to take out definite on purpose. There should be no definite, because if there is definite there, it can only be CT angio or MRA. In any situation with peripheral artery disease, somebody asks you, how would you make a diagnosis? CT and MRA are equivalent. So if both of them are listed, that means none of them can be the answer. Ultrasound is what you want to use, is what you will use generally at the initial beginning. All this MRA and CT angio, no plan will approve it for you as a primary care person. Once ultrasound is specific, you now send the patient to vascular surgeon. They order the MRA because they will use the image to plan the approach and everything. Okay, so don't get confused. I hope I did not confuse you. Okay. I hope you remember everything I say like you remember what I say. I was like, man, you said definite. Okay. All right, so how do you treat peripheral artery disease? How do you treat coronary artery disease? Risk reduction. Tell them to stop smoking. Control blood sugar. Control blood pressure. Control cholesterol. Symptomatic relief. Antiplatelet, aspirin, or Plavix. Unlike in coronary artery disease, you never combine aspirin and clopidogrel for peripheral artery disease. The only time you do that is when there is coronary artery disease. Don't get confused. Okay, this is a very slippery slope. Somebody can try to confuse you. Because remember I told you about dual antiplatelet therapy for coronary artery disease. That is the only place you use it. You don't use it for cerebral vascular disease. You don't use it for peripheral artery disease. Use it only for coronary artery disease. That is where the evidence is. You got it? Good. And then you can do the PD inhibitors like pentoxifylline, Trentol, or Salostazol, Plital. These are all advanced antiplatelet mechanisms. Then you do the supervised exercise program. Why do you want somebody with peripheral artery disease to do exercise? Because the more exercise they do, the more efficient the collateral circulations become. So with regular exercise, they can actually beat the surgical intervention. Okay, because they develop more efficient collateral circulation to compensate for that ischemia in the blood vessels. Okay. When would you do surgery? When your patient has rest pain. Remember, that is an evidence of critical limb ischemia. You will refer them to surgery. Or they have a debilitating disease, like a life-limiting disease, a disease that is now making them lose their job, like a postal worker or a mailman developing peripheral artery disease. If he's not getting better on Plavix and aspirin, you're going to send him for surgery because he's going to lose his job. People don't get as much money on disability as they get when they're on their job. Okay, actually they get about a third of their income. And your rent doesn't go to a third because you become disabled. And many of those folks that you see in the street, those homeless people, they didn't start out their life begging or being lazy. Life happens. Okay? What kind of intervention do we do? Endovascular. You can do angioplasty or stent, just like we do for coronaries, right? You can graft it. You can strip the atherosclerosis. And if your patient comes late, amputation and resection. That's the last thing you want to do. I had a patient as an intern when I was across the street. He was a diabetic guy. Very stubborn, my goodness, that man is stubborn. He doesn't listen to anything. And if you push, he will cuss you out. So I kind of left him alone. When I was an attending, about 5 years later, we were rounding and I saw this man. And I saw him. The man was half himself. In 5 years, he has had 4 amputations. The first one was the forefoot. The second one was below the knee. That was above the knee. And then that one didn't heal well. They now do just below the hip. The man was now a stump of himself. This was the man that told me, "Get out of there, you motherfucking African." And he walked with 2 feet out. And I was like, and then when I saw him, he was like, "Dr. Martins?" I said, "Yes." "How are you doing?" Everybody in the team was, I used to have a huge team, medical students, PAs, residents, fellows. Like, then I looked at him. He remembered the last time. And you know what happened? You know how hard it is for a black man to cry? This guy, in about 3 minutes, he couldn't say a word. He was just looking at me. Then I looked. He was tearing. You know, he didn't need to apologize. I didn't even need him to apologize. Unfortunately, it was too late. Because now, the reason he was in the hospital was because he has this renal insufficiency. He went to pulmonary edema and went to renal insufficiency. He has to go on dialysis. But he remembered. I remembered. Did it hurt when he called me that name and walked away? Yes, it did. But it was never about me. It was always about him. That curse was part of his disease. I can take that. That's why I'm a healthcare provider. And believe me, many patients will say many nasty things to you sometimes. And you have to be bigger, you know? And you don't have to be physically bigger, right? Just listen and walk away. There are other forces in nature that ensure justice and balance. You don't have to be the one enforcing it. You don't even know all the information you need to do it right. There are other forces in nature that can put everything together. Some of the pain people will put you through is because of some pains you have put other people through. And if you try to defend that pain, you will lose. You don't know. So many times, just walk away. Come on, what do you have to lose? Walk away. Why you can? It's not always you'll be able to walk away. Walk away whenever you can. So that is the kind of surgical intervention we do for peripheral artery disease. I don't want you here. This is where I want you. practice here and you never need them. You will save people's limbs, you save their lives, and you save their lifestyle. Even if they don't appreciate it, life will reward you. You know, sometimes you get into all these guidelines. Oh, goodness, guidelines. I'm beginning to hate guidelines because there are too many guides, too many lines, and I don't know which line to follow. American Heart Association, American Collegiate Association, American Medical Association. These are all supposed to be experts, but they can't agree. So I put this here to kind of just help you make sense a little bit. High intensity statins like rosuvastatin and Lipitor, you must use them whenever you have a clinical significant atherosclerotic coronary artery disease and your patient is less than 70. You want to use it when you can get the maximum benefit in time. Okay, age less than 75 is key. So give it to everybody less than 75 with atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. If they don't have atherosclerotic coronary artery disease, but they have bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol is more than 190, they should get high intensity. Okay? If their cholesterol is not more than 190 and they really don't have any evidence of atherosclerotic coronary artery disease, but they're diabetic, they're diabetic and less than 75 years old, you must compute their risk for atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. And if that risk is more than 7.5, you must put them on high intensity cholesterol medication. Okay? If you don't know of their coronary artery status, their LDL, and they're not diabetic, you compute their risk, 10-year risk for coronary artery disease. And if it's more than 7.5, you give them high intensity. Okay? So let me make sure that you really got that. Two numbers you must remember: 75 and 7.5%. Okay? If somebody has evidence of coronary artery disease and they are less than 75 years old, high intensity. Okay? If LDL is the highest it could be, which is 190, and they are less than 75, high intensity. If they are diabetic and nothing else, you compute the risk. If the risk is more than 7.5, high intensity. Otherwise, you can do with simvastatin and any other stuff. The only high intensity statins are rosuvastatin and Lipitor, atorvastatin. Okay? So that is just to kind of help you. The guidelines are so confusing, man. I'm like, this is just not good. What are some of the complications of limb ischemia? Thrombosis, embolism. How does it present? Pain, pallor, pulselessness, paresthesia, paresis. How do you diagnose it? Emergent invasive angiography. How do you grade it? This is how they grade it. Surgeons will do this. How would you treat it? They don't do a good job treating it, but this is what they do for treatment. What do I want you to know? I need you to know that there is a complication called acute limb ischemia. It is usually due to thrombosis or embolism. Thrombosis because the patient just had surgery. Or embolism because the plaque ruptured and causes a distal occlusion. How does it present? Pain, pallor, pulselessness, paresthesia, and paresis. You must remember those. I want you to remember that muscle weakness is not part of peripheral artery disease. It was never part of it. We didn't talk about that, right? Paresthesia was not part of peripheral artery disease. So whenever you see paresthesia and paresis within the context of peripheral artery disease, you're dealing with acute limb ischemia. Pain you get with PAD. Pallor you can get with PAD. Pulselessness you can get with PAD. Paresthesia and paresis you don't get with PAD unless you're dealing with acute limb ischemia. And acute limb ischemia, depending on how big the vessel is, you need to diagnose it, and the way to diagnose it is invasive angiography, and then you do, this is how they grade it, depending on the degree of sensory impairment, motor impairment, Doppler from arterial and venous side. And then depending on which class the patient falls in, you can give antithrombin, chloropraxis, very expensive medication. I'm not even seen it before, talking to prescribe it. And then you can do thrombolysis with catheter-directed thrombolysis, embolectomy or amputation. These are not good things. Yeah, this is the information, okay? I really don't even want anybody to have this. This is not a good thing. Okay? Because there is no real good, effective. You just need to know that for your exams. Okay? You're good? Mm-hmm. All right. Now, this is my last section. Now we are done with arterial side. Let's go to venous side. There are two venous diseases that you need to know about. Are there any questions about peripheral disease? Not right? Okay, so let's do this quickly. There is chronic venous insufficiency and there is varicose veins. In order for you to really understand venous diseases, especially these two, you need to understand the venous drainage from the lower extremities. I told you in my earlier lecture in cardiovascular how the big veins are buried within muscle, right? Because they depend on the muscle pump to return the blood. But you also recognize that there are veins on the surface, right? So many times the way it's supposed to work is that the veins on the surface, they drain through the perforating veins. So they drain from the surface and they pass the blood to the deep veins for it to be pumped up. Okay? So those veins that connect the superficial venous system to the deep venous system are called perforating veins. Okay? So even though you have the long subvenous vein, you have the short subvenous veins, these are superficial veins. The truth is that the deep veins are the ones that keep the blood flowing up. So, both chronic venous insufficiency and varicose veins, they have one thing in common: venous valve incompetence. Okay? Both of them. They have incompetence of the valves in the vein. The only difference between them is the beginning of the problem. Where did the incompetence start from? In patients with varicose veins, the incompetence begins in the superficial veins. Right? So you understand what happens, right? So the superficial veins, the valves become incompetent. So they are not able to pump blood up, to take blood out, right? So they get engorged. When they get engorged, they get distended. When they get distended, they now begin to distend the perforating veins. When they distend the perforating veins, what happens? The perforating veins become incompetent, right? When the perforating veins become incompetent, instead of taking blood from the superficial venous system to the deep venous system, they begin to leak blood back into the superficial system or the deep venous system because the valve is now incompetent in the perforators. You understand that, right? Right? Good. Now, so then we end up with varicose veins. In chronic venous insufficiency, it is the valves of the deep veins that become incompetent. So when the valves of the deep veins become incompetent, the deep venous system distends. When the deep venous system distends, they get engorged, they begin to distend the perforators. Well, remember, the valves are not, they don't grow longer than they were created or they were killed with born with. So if the valve cusp is like this, and the diameter of the vessel is from my wrist to my left wrist to the right wrist, if for as long as the veins remain normal size, the valve will stay closed and competent. If for any reason the vein begins to get distended, well, the valves are no longer touching themselves, so they become incompetent. So when the deep venous system valves become incompetent, the deep venous system begins to get distended, the perforators begin to get distended, and then the valves become incompetent. Blood now begins to leak again from the deep venous system to the superficial venous system. So both chronic venous insufficiency and varicose veins have in common venous incompetence. The only difference is that in varicose veins, the incompetence is from the superficial venous system, and in chronic venous insufficiency is from the deep venous system. Okay? And this is how it looks. Varicose veins, you see them? Varicose veins, they look like worms under the skin. Deep venous, chronic venous insufficiency is this red edematous venous system. You don't see any varicose veins or such, right? So what are the causes of it? Primary, superficial, pregnancy, prolonged standing. Nurses get a lot of varicose veins, right? Because they are on their feet most of the time. Security guards, especially female security guards, right? If they are standing a lot, heavy lifting, right? Girdle, corsets, you know, women that wear girdle and corsets. Because what you do is you constrict the superficial venous system, right? And you prevent them from draining blood, and you cause them to distend and engorge, and then you get varicose veins, all right? So that is primary. Secondary, somebody has deep vein thrombosis. Well, deep vein thrombosis is in the deep venous system, right? Or they get thrombophlebitis, or they get arteriovenous fistula or arteriovenous malformation. This will predispose you to chronic venous insufficiency. You good with that? Okay. How does it present? Varicose veins, incompetent venous valves and reflux, right? You get pain, but this pain is different from arterial pain. This pain is a dull ache, and it comes from venous stretch and distension. Okay, it's a dull ache. You get pitting pedal edema, right? This is not claudication, right? It's a dull ache. It has nothing to do with movement. Okay? They get pitting pedal edema. You don't get edema in peripheral artery disease, right? And because of the stasis in the veins, the red cells, they leak out into the subcutaneous tissue. And when the red cell leak out into the subcutaneous tissue, they release the hemoglobin into the tissue. And the hemoglobin gets converted immediately to hemosiderin. And that's where they get that brownish hyperpigmentation that you find around the ulcers, right? And then the skin becomes thick because of the chronic venous stasis, and becomes inflamed, called stasis dermatitis. With prolonged inflammation comes dermatosclerosis, which is just thickening of the skin, and then you get ulceration. And then the alteration tends to be above the malleoli, usually on the median side. Arterial ulcers tend to be on the lateral side. Arterial, lateral. Venous, medial. Okay? So you get a large, slowly healing and relatively painless ulcer above or below the medial malleolus. Again, bulging veins, varicose veins, leg swelling, And if you didn't talk about this in physical diagnosis, you talk about it in surgery. You have, because of this incompetence, you know that the valves, when the venous valves are competent, they break the blood column in the vein into many columns, right? And it's not continuous, right? So you cannot tap on this vein over here and feel anything down here, no, because they are separate columns. The valves separate them into columns. But when the valves are incompetent, it becomes a continuous column, right? When you tap up here, you can actually feel the vibration down there, right? A lot of these tests, Morris's coughing pulse test and Schwartz test is based on that continuous column. And then there is Brody Trendelenburg test. This is usually the test that actually tells you whether you're dealing with a superficial venous problem or you're dealing with a deep venous problem. And basically what happens is you have the patient lie down, right? And then you elevate the leg, right? When you elevate the leg, you drain it completely by gravity, right? Then you put a tourniquet right around just below the groin, right? So by putting the tourniquet, you are now occluding the superficial venous system, right? And then you tell the patient to stand up. Usually it takes a while for the superficial venous system to fill back up. But if the deep venous valves are incompetent, it fills immediately, right? So that's what Brody Trendelenburg does. And then Pettis test is what the surgeons do. Because the treatment for varicose vein is to strip the vein. It used to be that we strip the vein. Now they're using laser, right? So, but when they used to strip the superficial vein, they needed to make sure that the deep veins are okay, right? Because if the deep veins are not okay and you strip the superficial vein, you create problems. So Pettis test, as the way you can remember, is Pettis is for patency of the deep venous system. Okay, so you do Pettis test to make sure that the deep veins are patent prior to stripping the superficial vein. Okay, you're clear? Mm-hmm. So Brody Trendelenburg test is to diagnose. Schwartz and Morris is just tell you, yeah, the valves are incompetent, yeah, they're leaking. Brody is really the diagnostic test. Pettis is really to show the patency of the deep venous system. Okay, very important because you don't understand it, and then you, again, what do? You do ultrasound and you can see reflux when you do Doppler ultrasound. Okay, now here we go again. There is this group. Clinical etiology, anatomic pathophysiology, classification of chronic venous disorders. It's a bunch of surgeons and folks together, vascular surgeon. It's an international group. They have come up with this thing. It's been around since 1995. I've never heard any conference where anybody talked about it, but it's out there in the books, right? They come up with this classification, CEAP, classification for chronic venous disorder. It's just for your information, okay? So if you hear CEAP, you remember, oh, Dr. Martins talked about that. Good. How do you manage it? Well, the best thing is to prevent it, really. Avoid prolonged standing. What the heck is lower limb elevation? I don't know what that is. Doesn't even make sense. How do you lower limb elevation? I don't know, you'll come to me.
Like the lower limbs, you elevate them.
Oh yes, lower.
Yeah.
You elevate the lower limb. Yeah, thank you. I'm like, what is that? The lower and the elevation were like, in my mind, what am I lowering the elevation? Not the lower elevation. So it's lower in the elevation, right, to reduce the venous congestion and the edema. You use compression stockings, and you have to use 20 to 30 millimeters of mercury stockings for it to be really effective, right? Or you do pneumatic compression. If there is an ulcer, you have to do dropidomol. Don't call it debridement, it's not an English word. They call it, the French say dropidomol. Then you do compression dressing, and there is a boot called Honor boot with absorbent dressing that you can use. Katie will talk about all this in your surgery class. When do you do intervention? When you have the C2S stage. Surgeons know exactly what that means. It's based on that CAP classification, all right? And you have to make sure that the patient does not have peripheral arterial disease, okay? Before you go treating chronic venous insufficiency. What kind of intervention do we have? You have percutaneous thermal therapy, the one I told you, radio frequency ablation laser. You have sclerotherapy where they inject sclerosing agent into the vein and cause inflammation and fibrosis. And you can do phlebectomy, that is the venous stripping, right? All these surgical interventions, many of them are now becoming cosmetic surgery. Plans don't cover it anymore, and many patients that can afford it come out of pocket. Right? That is why I think most importantly, prevent. Okay? My patients that are security guards, and you know what's interesting? When guys do security guard, they don't get varicose veins. But women do security guard, they get varicose veins. The same thing with nurses. I'm like, I tell my patients that are nurses, I'm like, you know, you need to start thinking about doing something, either becoming a nurse practitioner or take MBA or something so you can become an administrator. Because you're not always going to be able to stand on your feet for 8 hours as you age. By the time you're over 40, you need to start doing something else. The way to live life is when you're young, you use your body and your muscle. But in the meantime, you're developing your mind. Once you get to a certain age, because the golden rule is your body gets weaker with time. So when your body is now weak, you can now start working with your mind. You know, when people don't practice that simple principle, then they end up with carpal tunnel syndrome, arthritis from chronic labor of this housekeeping stuff that people do. You know, it's not when you're 60 years old that you're supposed to be cleaning people's homes. You're supposed to do that in your 20s, when you're in school, not when you're in your 60s. Then you fell off the ladder, you broke your hip, and then you died. What kind of thing is that? All right. I'm not going to finish by 11. Do I have your permission to go by maybe 10-15 minutes? Please? Right?
Lunch is on you.
Hurry.
Okay, all right. All right. So that is about, I think I told too many stories. Any questions on venous insufficiency? You're good, right? So let's talk about thrombophlebitis. It's very simple.
Sorry, Dr. Marcus, so there's no medical intervention, like medication-wise?
For varicose veins? Venous, no. Nothing. Unless, of course, you dress the wound. You can give them triple antibiotics to dress the wound. It's a surgical thing. I'm sure Katie will talk more about this in surgery. You good? All right, let's talk about thrombophlebitis, a blood clot inducing inflammation in the vein. We talked about deep vein thrombosis, right? Phlebothrombosis earlier, right? Okay. This is thrombophlebitis. I want you to be very clear on the difference between phlebothrombosis and thrombophlebitis. Phlebothrombosis is just a clot sitting in a vein. Thrombophlebitis is a blood clot induced inflammation of the vein. Okay? Very important that you are able to tell the difference, right? It could be superficial thrombophlebitis, and it's very different from deep vein thrombosis, which is phlebothrombosis. Okay? Now, what are the causes of thrombophlebitis? Very simple. Sporadic, vascular disorders, varicosities, vasculitis, hemodynamic disorders, prolonged immobility, hypercoagulability, familiar clotting disorders like the protein C, protein S, remember that? And then higher stretching states. So the thing about it is you can have a blood clot sitting in the vein and it won't inflame the vein. That is phlebothrombosis. If the blood clot is inflaming the vein, that is thrombophlebitis. Okay? So it could be sporadic and it could be recurrent. Right? Now, when it is recurrent, pay attention. When thrombophlebitis travels from place to place in the body, that is a bad sign. It is called Trousseau sign, and that means your patient has pancreatic cancer. You should look for pancreatic cancer when you have migrating, fleeting thrombophlebitis. The reason that is important for you to know is because pancreatic cancer has a very high mortality rate because it is often not diagnosed early enough. By the time we diagnose it, most of the time it's spread and it's too late. Okay? And Whipple surgery that we do for it is terrible. How terrible it is, one of my friends said after Whipple surgery, you don't know what to throw away, the cancer or the patient, because they take so much out of the patient in the treatment of the cancer. All right? And then, so this is spontaneous. It could be induced when you put IV line in people or people shoot drugs, right? Sometimes people have to take antibiotics for up to 6 weeks and we put in them big lines and then send the nurse home to give them the injection at home and then they end up with inflammation, all right? You'll hear about big line in surgery. So what are the clinical features of thrombophlebitis? They are the features of inflammation, pain, redness, tenderness, and induration. Okay? And if the inflammation spreads into the systemic circulation from the superficial vein, the patient becomes septic. When your patient becomes septic, then they will get fever and chills. Why do we make such a big deal about thrombophlebitis and versus phlebothrombosis? Because you see, that's not what I want to say. It is important for you to understand how to tell thrombophlebitis from cellulitis, because cellulitis also presents with pain, redness, and tenderness and induration. The only difference is thrombophlebitis tend to be linear, whereas cellulitis tend to be circular. It is important for you to be able to tell this difference apart, because you know what? If somebody has cellulitis, you have to cover staph aureus. Thrombophlebitis, what you cover depends on the setting. If somebody gets thrombophlebitis from being discharged from the hospital and going home, or in nursing home, you have to cover Pseudomonas. If you don't cover Pseudomonas, that patient is not going to get better, right? So that's why it's extremely important that you tell the difference between thrombophlebitis and cellulitis. Again, you've seen this before, I know it. Thrombophlebitis and phlebothrombosis. I already made this point in my earlier conversation today, and you've seen this slide before, right? Right? Yes, you have. In phlebothrombosis, in pulmonology, let's talk about pulmonary embolism. Yeah. Okay. How do you treat it? It's very simple. Both superficial and peripheral, local heat, NSAID, and you always do DDT prophylaxis. Okay? Deep and central, when it is close to the central venous system, you have to use antibiotics. And like I told you, you have to cover with the right antibiotic. There are times you really have to go and do a venous ligation and strip the vein because of the risk of embolism. This is a surgical case. I'm not particularly enthusiastic about talking about it. I just need you to know the difference between phlebothrombosis and thrombophlebitis and be able to tell cellulitis from thrombophlebitis. In exam, they will describe thrombophlebitis as a linear induration, redness, pain, and swelling. Whereas in cellulitis, it's really circular. And most of the time with cellulitis, the point of origin, the point through which the bug got into this soft tissue space is in the center of the cellulitis. Okay, so you should never be confused about cellulitis and thrombophlebitis. Okay? Good. Oh. This is not good. All right. We talked about arterial diseases, we talked about venous diseases, right? Everything we've talked about right now about arterial disease and venous diseases, they are unique to the arterial side and venous side of the circulation. There are diseases that don't differentiate between venous versus arterial side. Together, we call them vasculitis or vasculitides. When the disease is not specific to arterial side or venous side, they involves both sides to different extent, and that's what makes them very complicated. So I found this cartoon, and I think it really does a very good job to tell you about the group of diseases that are known as vasculitis or vasculitides, and name them and tells you how they affect from the aorta to the vena cava, the extent to which they affect the arterial and venous side. They are all autoimmune diseases, and they are pretty complicated, and I don't have enough time to do justice to it, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to make do with whatever time we have. Okay, I forgot completely about this one. All right, so how do you classify it? Basically, we classify it as large vessel disorder, medium vessel disorder, and small vessel disorders. And you can see the list of what is called large vessel, medium vessels, and small vessels. And when you talk about small vessel disorders, you break them into two, right? The anchor associated and the immune complex blood vessel vasculitis. Now, let me just warn you. It looks complicated, and it is complicated, but as I go along, I will tell you what I need to know, okay? So don't bother your head about this. There are some things you need to know. A lot of this is just FYI, okay? So large vessel disease has only two, giant cell and Takayashi, right? Giant cell is also known as temporal arteritis, right? How does it present? It affects the temporal artery. So it presents as headache, and because the branch of the temporal artery supplies the eyes, they can get sudden loss of vision, known as amaurosis gigax. They can see double vision when they have ischemia of their extraocular muscle, and the eyes are not able to move together. So they get double vision, and when they chew, they get pain in their jaw because of ischemia, right? So temporal arteritis, very important, right? And you can actually, when you see them, they're usually in old white men, and when you see them, you can see the temporal artery is so thick and is tender, right, along the way. The reason this is so important and everybody makes a big deal out of it is because it's easy to diagnose and easy to treat. All you need to give the patient is prednisone and they're home and dry. Okay? Very important. Remember the visual symptoms: headaches, jaw claudication, elderly with elevated ESR. Okay? Now, Takayasu is the second large vessel disease. It's known as pulseless disease. You're looking for a young female oriental in Takayasu. Okay? Young female oriental. And Takayasu does not affect the head, it affects the limb more. So it has a limbal emphasis. Okay? So this is a patient that will get pain from using their arm. They can never be housekeepers. And when it's worse, they get rest pain, right? And they can get all this. They can get some signs and symptoms of giant cell arteritis, like ischemic attack, amaurosis fugax, even jaw claudication, the clue to Takayashi's disease is that young female Oriental versus an old white man. Okay?
Okay.
And this is another cause for radial asymmetry. Okay? Now, medium vessel, so that is all about large vessel. Those are the only two I want you to know about large vessel. Now, about medium vessel vasculitis, you have to know about three of them: polyarthritis, Kawasaki, and Buerger's. Kawasaki is a pediatric thing. Okay? Just know that it's a pediatric entity, and they have this thing called idiopathic pediatric crash and burn disease. Just the crash and burn is a way to remember the symptomatic manifestations of it. Okay, I can't tell you much about that. The pediatrician will tell you more about that. What I need you to know is Buerger's and polyarthritis. Buerger's disease is usually seen in male, non-African, middle-aged, heavy smoker. So middle-aged, heavy smoker male, they will get Buerger's disease. It's called thromboangiitis obliterans. This is an example of what it does. It's almost like these smokers are getting punished for smoking because TI takes out the fingers. Right? It's interesting. Now, polyarthritis, just like it says, it affects many arteries and it forms nodes. That's why it's called polyarthritis nodosa. Okay? And because it affects many vessels, it is multi-systemic in its manifestation, right? So when it affects the nervous system, they can get strokes or neuropathy. When it's cardiovascular, they can get a heart attack, even a heart failure. So you have somebody who might be 26 years old with a heart attack. Of course, you know, 26-year-old non-smoker with a heart attack. You've got to think about vasculitis, right? That is the clue. A young person, no risk factors with a heart attack, is a vasculitis. Okay? Then, in the renal system, you can get renal insufficiency or hematuria. In the skin, I've told you already, you get palpable purpura. Anytime you find palpable purpura, you must think vasculitis. Don't worry. Sharon will talk about that next in the summer in your dermatology classes. Okay? There is something you need to pay attention to here. In polyarthritis nodosa, notice that the lungs are spared. Even though it's multi-systemic, it does not involve the lungs too much. You know why that is important? Because in small vessel diseases, you have Wegener's that is centered only around the lungs, right? And it's a vasculitis. You have Church-Strauss that you find with asthma. Remember, these are not new. We talked about this before, right? Yeah. Okay. And then immune complex, cryoglobulinemia, inoxion line, and hypocomplementinic urticarial vasculitis. Now, you notice that the large vessel disease, there are only two of them, right? Giant cell and Takayashi, right? In the medium vessel, there are only three of them. Kawasaki is pediatric. They have polyarthritis nodosa that is multi-systemic, right? And then you have Buerger's, it's a smoker guy, right? The one that's a little bit more complicated is the small vessel diseases. And the good thing about it is that you've already learned about half of it already. Because remember, we talked about Church-Strauss, right? With asthma. What do they have in common? You find this in people with existing illnesses. All right? So, Church-Strauss is asthma. Urticaria, the patient has a history of allergy, urticarial allergy. Cryoglobulinemia, they have hepatitis C virus, right? Inoxion, they have just had usually some infection, a diarrhea or something, right? It's a post-infectious hypersensitivity. So small vessel diseases usually is a complication of another disease. You got it? Small vessel vasculitis is a complication of another disease. Okay? That is the difference And I hope with that you can actually piece them together and make the difference. Why am I even bothering you with all this? Because you know why? I can't even justify it just for exams. Because in practice, all of them are treated with one medication, steroids. What does it matter? Whether you call shock Strauss and polyangiitis, give them steroid patient as well. I'm going right? I wish it was that easy. There is this other group. I just put this here because I will test you on this one. These are variable vascular disorders, right? In other words, they don't really fit like any of the other group, large, small, or medium. The good thing is that there are just about 3 of them. There is Cogan's. Cogan's is just keratitis, deafness, and vertigo within the context of the vasculitis. You just need to know what Cogan's is. I can't explain it. I can't help you understand it. You just have to remember that when you have vasculitis with visual problem and dizziness, you should think about, and deafness, you should think about Cogan's syndrome. Now, Behçet's. Behçet disease is really chronic relapsing vasculitis. It tends to be more of a small vessel disease, but it can affect the large vessel as well. That is why they call them variable vessel vasculitis. Why is this important? Stop writing, just listen for a minute, because this, if you understand this whole slide will make sense to you very quickly. Here is a patient with vasculitis coming to you with painful oral ulcer, genital ulcers, and skin ulcer. You would think very quickly this is herpes, right? But it's not. It's Behçet's, right? How would you tell it apart? They have what is called pathogen. In other words, you send them for blood draw, and the needle prick where the blood was drawn develops into a big allergic bump, like a wheel, right there. It's called a positive pathogen test. Okay, it's an exaggerated response to skin trauma. This is somebody you will scratch their skin a little bit and develop a wheel around it. Okay, that is called pathogen test. Why do we always talk about Behçet? Because you don't ever want to confuse Behçet with aphthous and herpes. Okay, Behçet, they have positive pathogen. How do you tell herpes from aphthous? Herpes ulcers always give you intraoral lesions. You have lesions inside the mouth, right? Whereas aphthous ulcers are usually outside the mouth. Okay, so even though I put this together here, like they are part of vasculitis, no, they're not. Aphthous is not a vasculitis. Herpes simplex is not a vasculitis. The only vasculitic conditions here is Behçet's and Cogan. You got it?
Okay.
Okay, so this is easy to knock out. I only put aphthous and herpes here to help you clinically. When you see somebody with ulcers around the mouth, it can only be 3 things: cold sores, herpes, or Behçet's. Okay, and usually there will be history of pathogen in the other cases. How does it present? See, depends on what type and where it is. You have all these problems in the skin. Don't worry about this. Levator reticularis is venous congestion in the superficial venous network. You will talk about that in dermatology. I just mentioned it here. Palpable purpura. You see this and you can run your hand on the patient's skin and it looks like sandpaper, right? It's called palpable purpura. And depending on where the inflammation is, you can get all this stroke, reduced biliary activity. We talked about all this already. How do we evaluate it? Oh my goodness, I feel like I'm doing injustice to you guys. I'm going so fast through this. I am so sorry. I don't know how.
Can we finish at the beginning of pulmonology?
Huh?
Can we carry over to the next lecture? In pulmonology, because we have it later today as well. And pulmonary is
Good
shorter.
idea. Good idea. Let's start. I forgot. Yeah, so much. I want to make a critical look at everything we talked about before. The peripheral artery disease is straightforward, right?
Sorry. I thought that was coming.
Medication, resting, gangrene, and tissue, right? That's pretty straightforward. All these is preventing. If you go out of hand, you have to replace it. It's pretty straightforward, right? And then for the venous disorders, chronic venous insufficiency and varicose it's pretty straightforward. It's about venous valve, right? Superficial and depending on which one goes to. If somebody has, say, chronic, they have a DPT. So they had a DPT last year, and they were given warfarin for 6 months, right? And now the vein is no longer occluded, but they have this redness and new swelling. Would you call that venous thrombosis? No, you would call it chronic venous insufficiency. That means, yes, the vein was recanalized, but the valve was taken out. Right? So the valve has been lost. So most of the time, chronic venous insufficiency is a complication of the disease. Right? See, so I gave you a lot of information, but I really wanted to kind of like see what this is all about. You know, whenever anything appears complicated, I like to give you a bird's eye view. So you can see everything together. Once you can see everything together and tell them apart, then the whole thing becomes small. That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm not starting this afternoon session. I just wanted to kind of like make sure I see the morning session in tight so that you guys are good at it. Okay? And then, what else did we talk about this morning? Of course, aortic dissection and aneurysm, you are clear on that one. You know the difference between the pain of aortic dissection. Even if there is ST2 changes, you know how to tell the dissection from MI. The patient's history is key. Right? Remember that? Yeah. And then, what else did we talk about this morning? For patient, yes.
Can the dissection cause the rupture? I mean, wait.
Yeah, you can
Can it
dissect.
cause the rupture of the aneurysm? Like you have an aneurysm?
Wow, that is a very interesting question because if you have an aneurysm, you have a weaker vessel already. So if you have a blood trauma to the abdomen or to the chest, you can actually rupture the weak intima, and that will create a dissection. If you dissect an aneurysm, you will rupture almost always.
No, so aneurysm.
Because it's like double weakness. Right. Now, remember I told you that your cardiology exam, your cardiology exam is cumulative, right? Yeah, it's cumulative in the sense that there will be a lot of questions from congenital heart disease. Okay? All congenital diseases, all those moments. You must know those. You have to find those, right? And then remember endocarditis, right? Endocarditis, the prophylaxis and the presentation, rough spots and all this other stuff. Remember all those. So basically, really, there isn't much more of anything else. Just focus on congenital heart disease. Very important. Okay? And there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. Blanking here. Okay, but I'll let
What about EKGs?
Oh, of course, reading. You have a lot of reading questions. EKG, yeah.
How many questions is it? 50, 60?
Huh?
It's like 60 questions?
60 questions, yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of making it 100 questions for the next week.
Yeah, remember them.
No, you have to model the hands.
What about like the syncope and all that?
It's mostly congenital and breathing. Everything else is from this semester.
Did you say no syncope?
Huh?
Did you say no syncope?
Syncope, if you have any syncope, it will be related to the breathing. Right? Yeah, syncope by itself, no. So this was the topic I started this morning, and I was feeling so bad. Every single slide I shifted, I felt a weight on my heart. And God, it's not right. Yeah, but I'm sorry, anybody offended when I refer to you guys as kids? Please don't be offended. You are all my age of my nieces and nephews. So that is how close I feel about you. You really have to succeed. And I know some people may feel like, oh, why is he calling me kid? I'm not trying to disrespect you. It's the way I can express how truly I feel about you. Right? So if it offends you, I will stop it. But you will rob me of that joy of calling you. All right? So I want to go over this because I was looking at you this morning and everybody was looking like, oh, what is he talking about now? It's not hard. Earlier we talked about peripheral artery disease. And then we talked about venous disease, right? And you notice that when we're talking about arterial disease, it was arterial disease, right? No confusion. When we talk about venous disease, it was venous disease. There was no confusion. Well, it's not always like that in medicine. Medicine is complicated. Nothing is true or false all the time in medicine. So there are a whole lot of diseases that affect both the artery and the veins. And they don't even do it equally. Some affect more of the veins, less of the arteries. Some affect more of the arteries, less of the veins, but they affect both. This group of diseases is what we call vasculitis. That is what I think it should be. But some people call it vasculitis because the argument is, okay, vasculitis just talks about inflammation of the blood vessels, singular. Since many blood vessels can be involved, we need to look for a plural word for vasculitis. Then they came up with vasculitis. I'm like, well, if you're going to follow the rule of grammar in medicine, the way you change vasculitis to plural for vasculitis is by changing this I to E. That is what it should be. But, people like to make new words, especially in medicine. Like to make things up on themselves and complicate everything. Right? So, this is a bird's eye view of vasculitis or vasculitis. It tells you the relative involvement from the arterial side, aorta, to the venous side, right? And then that gives you the names of the diseases and how much overlap there is. You notice that for most of them, they are affecting the venules and the arterioles, right? And then there are some clear-cut, giant cell, large vessel diseases, and there are some, actually very few small vessel diseases. They're all about here, right? So this is just a bird's eye view. Look at Behçet's. Behçet's affects everything, and it's the only one that does it. It affects large, medium, small, from aorta to vena cava. Cogan's is mostly large, small, and medium arteries, but that's about it. The rest of these are mostly small vessel diseases. And earlier today, I told you about, this is the way we look at vasculitis. Large vessels, medium vessels, and the small vessel diseases. And I told you that you can divide the small vessel diseases into two groups. Those that are mediated by immune complex and those that are mediated by anchor, anti-neutrophilic cytoplasmic antigen antibody. This is just, all I want you honestly is just know that there are vasculitis because the large, medium, and small. Remember examples of each one. Takayasu is large, right? Polyarthritis nodosa is medium, right? Behçet is small, and then just know those. I'm not going to test you on this. No, I've not seen any of them. I'll be looking at your questions. I've looked at over 1,000 questions for the PANS boards, right? And I've not seen one that asks you for specific on this. All right, so it's not a big deal. Don't stress it. Just know that there's vasculitis are divided into large, medium, and small. And remember at least one example under each of those, right? The ones that you really need to know are specifics. Like I told you about giant cell arthritis, I've seen questions on giant cell arthritis. Okay? And the reason they wanted to know about it is because it is so troubling and yet so easy to treat. So you're looking for an old white man with jaw claudication, may have visual disturbances, but definitely unilateral headaches. And many, many times they might throw a curveball at you, try to send you down the alley of migraine with a unilateral headache. Because when you see unilateral headache, the first thing you think about is, oh, migraine. No, hold on, read the question. If it is a unilateral headache in an old white man with elevated ESR that may have jaw claudication, that is not migraine. That is more likely to be temporal arthritis. And you know what I also noticed in reviewing your questions? You know the way I test you after class with specific details? Your exams are set different. They bunch everything together. So if you're not really solid on how to figure out signs and symptoms, it will be very difficult to pass. So I'm formatting the board review question in the summer to make sure that I change from my format to the format of the exam, so that you get used to those kind of questions as we go forward. So we talked about giant cell arthritis, and then Takayashi. Remember Takayashi, okay, is a young female Oriental Asian, okay. Why are they called all right. Remember that they're both large vessel disease. And as a matter of fact, patients with Takayashi, which is an arthritis, autoimmune, can also have some features of giant cell arthritis. The way you know that this is not giant cell arthritis is because this is a female, usually of Oriental origin, and more importantly, they have limbal involvement. She gets tired chopping and cooking and cleaning, okay? And she's a young female Oriental. Remember radial, okay? And then I told you about this polyarthritis nodulosa. Now, you see, for large vessel, that is all there is, okay? Now, for medium vessel, what about the three diseases? Kawasaki is a pediatric syndrome, and those collections there, the crash and burn, I hate that term, right? But it's what they use to remember the symptoms of Kawasaki, okay? We don't know what causes it, but it tends to be post-viral. Kids get a viral infection and then get Kawasaki vasculitis. It's an autoimmune complication, and it presents with all that stuff. The one I want you to know, that I think is important, is Buerger's and polyarthritis nodosa. Buerger's in smokers and polyarthritis nodosa in everybody else. And he has a multi-systemic manifestation. And I want you to remember that, thank you. I want you to remember that vasculitis is a vasculitis. It will cause vascular occlusion, right? It's an autoimmune disease. It has nothing to do with cholesterol, blood pressure, or smoking. It has nothing to do with any of those. So whenever you see any case where they present to you a coronary syndrome, somebody having chest pain and EKG changes, and it's a young person, it's not a smoker, doesn't have hypertension, no diabetes, you don't see risk factors, that is your clue right there that this is a vasculitis, okay? And the one that can present to you like that is polyarthritis nodosa or polyarthritis, periarthritis, okay? So that was what I was talking about. And then this was where I got to, and I was talking about
Dr.
the small
Martins.
vessel diseases. Yes.
Earlier you said the lungs are spared. Were you talking about polyarthritis?
Yes.
Why are the lungs spared?
It's the pattern of the disease,
Oh, okay.
right? And the reason I wanted to make a note of it is that, look, even though I told you it's multi-systemic manifestations,
Mm-hmm.
it affects the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, renal system, something is missing, right? It's sparing the GI and the lungs.
Mm.
You notice that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a pattern for polyarthritis I want you to notice. Why is that important? Because it is that pattern that distinguishes inoxalan purpura from and Wegener's from polyarthritis nodosa. You got that?
No. Okay.
Inoxalan is usually multisystemic and it has GI involvement, so they have abdominal pain and diarrhea. They will bloody diarrhea, right? And of course, Church-Strauss, again, multisystemic manifestation, again with gut involvement, right? But in Church-Strauss, they also have lung involvement, right? Are you with me?
Mhm.
You get the difference. The reason I made the specific note of the absence of lung involvement in polyarthritis is because that is your contrasting feature with Church-Strauss and GI involvement. But as a group, small vessel diseases are seen usually in cases where there is an underlying illness, right? So for instance, in inoxalan purpura, it's a post-infectious hypersensitivity. So the kid gets an infection, bacterial infection, pneumonia, whatever it is. There's an infection about 2 weeks earlier. And then 2 weeks later, the kid comes with bloody diarrhea, palpable purpura. You know this is most likely inoxalan purpura. Okay? That is key, right? In cases of Church-Strauss, the patient has asthma, right? Okay. So these really are the two of the small vessel diseases that they will expect you, that I would ask you, but anybody can ask you any one of these among small vessels. Remember cryoglobulinic vasculitis for HCV, people with hepatitis C virus infection, okay? That is your key right there. If they're they're presenting vasculitis and they're telling you the patient has a history of hep C virus infection, you're thinking cryoglobulinemia. You know, the way I remember this thing is C for cryo, right? Sometimes it helps, right? It's like arterial ulcers on the lateral side, arterial, lateral, right? Good. Because it's a lot of information. You have to figure out a scheme to remember it, right? And then, hypocomplementinic urticarial vasculitis. Just remember that they have wheels. Okay? So, but the only vasculitis with wheels is this hypocomplementinic. They all have low complement because it's autoimmune disease, right? But this one has wheels, non-pruritic wheels. You know that's a weird wheel, right? Most wheels are itchy, right? So a non-pruritic wheel is suggestive of this hypocomplementinic urticarial vasculitis. Okay? So that really is what I want to talk about. Just don't want you to be intimidated. Yeah.
What is PAN?
What is what?
We lost PAN.
Polyarthritis.
Oh.
Polyarthritis nodosa. All right, and then this was where I was when I started last time. I said variable vasculitis. The vasculitis syndrome is just like totally pathetic. There's too many things happening. These are called variable vasculitis because you really cannot put them into large, small, or medium, right? And I said that this slide is not really part of vasculitis slide because the only vasculitides on these slides are Behçet's and Kogan's. The reason I put this here is the reason that I'm talking about this vasculitis, because this vasculitis here, they look like aphthous ulcer and herpes, especially Behçet's, right? Because many times in practice, you see a patient walking up to you with ulcers around the mouth and the genitalia, the first thing you will think about is herpes, herpes, herpes. And about 90% of the time, you will be right, it's herpes, herpes, herpes. But remember, it could also be canker. This is aphthous ulcer. And I told you the difference between aphthous ulcer and herpes is that in aphthous, you have no extra oral manifestation. Whereas in herpes, is in and out. Okay, very important difference.
Excuse me, but what do you mean by extra oral manifestation?
The
It's
ulcers,
like on outside the mouth.
the ulcers are both on the outside and the inside of the mouth. Right? Whereas in aphthous, on the inside. You got it? Okay. So how do you know you're dealing with the vasculitis? If you're lucky, your patient will present with these skin lesions. Lipido reticularis. You see this in light-skinned people, as you can imagine. The veins will form a mesh, like a lace. So the skin looks like a lace material. You know what lace material is? Good. It's like a lace material. So it's called and it's as a result of the congestion of the veins in the uppermost layer of the skin, right? It's called lipido reticularis. It's like a mesh, reticulum, right? And then this is the typical palpable purpura. You see this punctate red dot, and when you run your hand over it, it's very rough. Okay, it's called palpable purpura. Okay, that is what tells you this is a vasculitis. If you see this, and when you run your hand over it, you can't feel anything, that is what is called petechia. Okay, that's what petechia is. The difference between petechia and purpura is palpability. And when you see palpable purpura, that is really the vasculitis going on. Okay?
Dr. Lawrence, question on the middle.
Reticularis?
I see like a lot of newborn infants with that. Okay? Some of them are scared.
And that's different, that's corpus mammaratum.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, when you suspect that somebody has vasculitis, you know, pediatric was mine. I didn't like to take care of sick children. I just couldn't stand it. That I cannot help. So, I don't pay too much attention to sick children. Send them away. So once you're thinking that somebody has vasculitis, you begin to see, okay, this patient is looking like a vasculitis. You look for a possible etiology. Unfortunately, there is no way to diagnose the vasculitis. The diagnosis of vasculitis is a clinical diagnosis. You can only look for evidence of inflammation, like elevated ESR. You might look for the anchor antibody in the serum, but there is not one test that can clue you into the cause of the vasculitis. And it's immaterial clinically because at the end of the day, everybody gets prednisone. All right? So you're able to get your diagnosis from the routine lab work. Sometimes you have to do biopsy. The only vasculitis that honestly we do biopsy for, anybody guess? Giant cell, exactly. Because it's the only one that affects only one blood vessel that you can actually go there and get a biopsy of that blood vessel. Others is so widespread, like, okay? And then you can do angiogram where appropriate. This is in a patient where you have coronary symptom and you're not sure what you're dealing with, right? So once you establish a vasculitis, then you're now looking for patterns. See why I mentioned that it's extremely for you to differentiate large vessel, medium vessel, small vessel. Does it involve the gut? Does it involve the lungs along with anything else? Or does it spare the gut and the lung? Those patterns are what help you to differentiate what you might be dealing with, right? If it involves the kidneys and there is hematuria, you may be dealing with regulars, right? If you've seen in a patient with asthma, it might be Chuck's rounds, right? If you've seen it in a patient that has sore throat 2 weeks earlier and now presenting with all this rash, it might be polyarteritis, right? The post-infectious vasculitis that we talked about. This one. This post-infectious hepatitis, right? Okay, so that is, once you identify those patterns, you now do the specific test. You do the specific test to identify that particular one. If you are able to identify what the offending agent is, which is so rare and almost impossible, you're never able to do that. So this is wishful thinking to identify offending agent. And you see what it says, treat vasculitis. Even like this, I put this here because it's from a major textbook. It's actually from, what is that reference textbook in medicine, right? And Harrison. But I look at it like, well, why did this guy put this here? Because at the end of the day, you don't wait to be here to treat vasculitis. What do we do in practice? You see vasculitis, you throw steroid at the patient when you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. You know, whether you recognize the pattern or you don't recognize the pattern, there is no damage, no harm. You can't do harm by giving anybody steroids if they have vasculitis, right? It will not hurt you to start with prednisone 10 milligrams 3 times a day. Come back and see me in 2 weeks. You get it? So it's not, in reality, you don't wait until you get here to treat the vasculitis. So generally you do the evaluation, general blood test. You can do specifics because you know that Hep C will give you cryoglobulinemia, right? Rheumatoid arthritis could be a cause for vasculitis. Vasculitis could be a manifestation of lupus, right? And you do cryoglobulin levels, you do complement levels because there is that hypocomplementinic variety. You do immune complex levels, you do anchor levels. These are very specific, expensive tests. So before it will be done, you must have enough clinical suspicion before you order these tests, okay? How do you treat it? See that? Limited vasculitis, no critical organ involvement, you just want to wait, right? Moderate with critical organ involvement, you use steroids. The good thing is that most of them respond to steroids, but there will be those stubborn cases where you might have to go to biologics, like cyclophosphamide, rituximab, and then once your patient responds to steroid, you send them to rheumatology and then deal with the other issue. You're done. Okay? All you need to do is identify this is a vasculitis, initiate the relief, have the patient maintained, right? And because this is immune mediated, if you're not getting any headway with your steroid, you send the patient to the emergency room for plasma exchange therapy called plasmapheresis, right? You know what that is? Lindsay talked about that, right? Good. Yeah. So you just dilute out the antibodies. Okay? Good. I think that's it. So I have some fun questions. So we'll have 5 minutes to do this questions and then I'll go back to the next page. So Christian, what is the most appropriate next step in the evaluation of a 56-year-old female with a history of hypertensive heart disease who presents with progressive shortness of breath? Physical examination is significant for diminished femoral pulses with a radial femoral arterial pulse delay. Blood pressure readings are normal and equal in both arms. The apical impulse is shifted and sustained. First and second heart sounds were heard and normal. There is an S4 gallop, but no heart murmurs, and no groove in the epigastrium or over the femoral artery. What would you do? What test would you do? Thank you. Excellent. All right. Why not type blood pressure measurement?
Why not high blood pressure measurement?
Mhm.
I already know that. Our normal equal values. So.
Excellent. So, does everybody agree?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Kiara. So here is a 65-year-old male, hypertensive diabetic, with a history of coronary artery disease, 3-week history of left calf and foot pain precipitated by exertion and relieved by rest. So it looks like intermittent claudication, right? Physical examination is unremarkable except for faint femoral, popliteal, and pedal pulses on the right. The pulses are absent on the left, and there is a small ulcer on the medial side of the left great toe. The question is, what is the ADI and the most appropriate next step in the management of this patient? What is the ADI? Calculate the ADI. What is 250 over 152? You don't have a calculator? Yeah, okay. Give us the number. What number do you want
So it'd be
to?
more than one, right?
Yeah, but what we're looking for ankle brachial index. So how would you calculate the ankle brachial index from these numbers?
So I do like 250 over.
Exactly, 250 over 152 or 255 over 156. If you do that, you end up with
It's like about.
about 1.6, right? Okay, so with 1.6, what are you going to do? If somebody you're thinking has peripheral, so what are you going to do? Thank you. So the answer is C, right? It's 1.6, it's about 1.3. Patient is symptomatic. Remember, normally it's more than 1.3. But because the patient is symptomatic, you have to look for toe brachial index.
And
You got that?
Yeah.
Wait, so Dr. Hunt, so to calculate API, you have to divide the systolic
Ankle.
blood pressure
Yeah, it's
for the
ankle
and
brachial.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So you just-
it's ankle brachial index. So
so
you
the
divide
ankle
the,
by the brachial.
exactly,
Oh,
the ankle by the brachial.
Okay,
Right, got it?
And it doesn't matter which one, right?
You don't, no. You must use left or
No,
right.
what I'm saying, it doesn't matter if you're doing the left or the right.
It does not matter.
Oh,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly. Most of the time it's the same.
And
Okay.
Dr. Myers, after you find, you decide to like look for the TBI.
Yeah.
So like you're just wondering if the TBI is above 1.3 after that, right?
TBI, honestly, what you have to do is identify that there is ABI more than 1.3, and patient is symptomatic. You refer the patient to podiatry for TBI.
Okay.
They will measure the TBI, they will give you a number and tell you it's in range or out of range.
Okay.
All right. Remember, I didn't give you normal for TBI.
Nah, that's what I was wondering.
Excellent. All right. Eden, what is the most likely diagnosis? Where is it?
Where?
Okay. What is the most likely diagnosis in a 55-year-old female hypertensive non-smoker with a history of the heart murmur who presents with 3-month history of progressive shortness of breath? No associated autopnea, no PND, no leg swelling. So basically, I'm telling you, the patient does not have a heart problem. Okay. And then physical examination is significant for blood pressure 180/80 in both arms. Normal GFP, clear lung fluids, shifted and sustained epical impulse. So the left ventricle is filled with from pressure, right? Okay. Normal S1, soft and single S2. That should ring a bell, right? Audible S4, so there is pressure overload at the apex, a systolic murmur, loudest at the right upper sternal body. Right upper sternal body is the aortic area, right? The femoral pulses are diminished with the radial femoral pulse delay, but the dorsalis pedis are absent. This is a pretty hard question. Or you can, if you can figure out the story I'm telling here, you can figure this out. So Eden, what do you think is going on? You can do elimination if you want, and I will think with you.
Okay, so it's not aortic regurgitation.
It is not aortic regurgitation. Wow, interesting. Why did you say that?
Okay, so
It is not aortic regurgitation. I agree with you.
the solid number.
Why are you so sure it's not aortic regurgitation?
That's because it has to be a diastolic.
Thank you. Thank you. See, this is how I want you to think about situations. For sure, it is not aortic regurgitation because the murmur is systolic and it is soft. Right? Okay. So it's not that one. So, what else isn't it?
It's not hypertensive.
It is not hypertensive heart disease. Can you really say that? Because there is an audible S4, right, which you will find with pressure overload, which is common with hypertrophy, right, which is part of hypertensive heart disease. And there is elevated pressure, 180/80 in both arms. But I agree with you, it cannot be hypertensive heart disease because of this radiofemoral and absent basilic spirit, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So that one is out. So what are we dealing with here? It could not, can it be aortic dissection?
No.
Thank you, because it's painless, right? Excellent. So we're down to aneurysm or coarctation. Would aneurysm give you all these pulses?
No.
Exactly. Right? So everybody agree this is aortic coarctation? Now the question is, if this is aortic coarctation, why do we have that soft and single S2? Thank you. The coarctation limits the left ventricular ejection, so it softens the second heart sound, right, and make it single. Because remember, the reason you have the splitting of the second heart sounds is because of the prolonged and delayed ejection from the right side. Right? The right side has to pump the same volume, right, with small muscle mass. So its ejection takes longer, right? But now with coarctation, the ejection of the left is also taking longer because of the coarctation, right? So this normal split you will find is no longer there. That's the second answer, is single. You got it?
Yeah.
Everybody clear on this one? Yeah. Excellent, excellent. So let's match. Stanley. Match the features on the left with most appropriate diagnosis on the right. Chest pain?
C.
Good. Claudication? Medial leg ulcer?
Medial leg ulcer, arterial, SD.
Medial leg ulcer.
Which one's that?
Remember, anterior, lateral?
Oh, my bad, yeah. So, like, medial's venous.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Palpebral purpura?
We just did that, the little flip, vasculitis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thromboembolism?
Yeah,
Aneurysm, right?
Okay.
So what is claudication?
D. Arterial insufficiency.
Arterial insufficiency. Thank you. Right? We are good with that?
Yeah.
Excellent. So what is the most appropriate starting treatment for this 62-year-old female hypertensive with a history of peripheral vascular disease and a 10-year atherosclerotic coronary vascular disease risk of 5 to 4%? And this is the lipid profile. Ali,
I feel like C,
atorvastatin, right? 40 because she's where is she?
She's less
Okay,
than
she has it.
seven-
She's 10 years, but it's less than 7.5.
But she's less than 75.
Sorry?
She's less than 75 years old.
She's less than 75 years old. No, I want you to, I understand your answers, but I want you to give me the logic behind it. She's less than 75 years old, right? And she has, but the risk is less than 7.5, right?
Then you wouldn't need any additional.
But she has peripheral vascular disease. So what would you give her?
Yeah, so add C.
At the president, good. No, just bring your legs to make sure you know. So the fact that she's less than 75 years old and she has peripheral vascular disease. She has peripheral vascular disease. I told you that peripheral vascular disease is equivalent to atherosclerotic coronary artery disease when you see this. Remember that? Okay, yeah. So here is this 56-year-old female. Now, here is this 56-year-old female, hypertensive, presenting with progressive shortness of breath, and physical examination is significant for diminished femoral pulses with radial femoral arterial pulse delay. Blood pressure readings are equal in both arms. Apical impulse is shifted and sustained. First and second heart sounds were heard and normal. There is an S4 gallop, but there are no heart murmurs, no bruit in the epigastrium or over the femoral artery. What are you dealing with here? She's 56 years old. She's coming post-doctoral aortic stenosis. It's not dilated cardiomyopathy, of course. Yeah, that's for renovascular hypertension. There is no root, right? Hypertensive heart disease, where that come from? I didn't tell you anything about that, right? So, because of the radio femoral pulse delay, you have to definitely call it post-doctoral aortic stenosis, right? Good, excellent. Post-doctoral, yeah. All right, we're good, right? So let's now talk about the first thing. So now I'm going to switch gear